Dun, dun, dun. Let's do it.
Hey guys, welcome to the Iron Disciple podcast. We have an awesome, very interesting, fascinating guest today. His name is Will Spencer. He's at the Renaissance of Men, and he's got a documentary he's going to be doing coming up soon. He mentors men. He's also got a workshop coming up soon that we'll be talking at. Super busy guy, fascinating history. If you guys get the chance to check out his bio, what was the podcast? Will?
Cultish.
Cultish, yeah.
Right. You'll hear about his past. Very eclectic. He's been through the whole ayahuasca, the New Age, been in search of truth. I talk a lot about Burning Man, where and how he encountered Jesus. It certainly wasn't your run-of-the-mill typical encounter with Christ, where he met Jesus. And he's come through all this. He has so much experience. And very, very smart person that is founded on empirical experience, not just book knowledge. He went out there and did these things, explored himself, put himself in these positions all around the world to come up with this new concept of the Renaissance of Men, which he believes is going to be sort of like the ending of the red pill and the beginning of a more full-bodied of masculinity coming here in the future, and hopefully a balance between the femininity. But today we want to introduce Will Spencer. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for that intro. That was great.
Yes, and I would like to ask you, how'd you come up with the title Renaissance of Men? For the people that don't understand the eras and the epochs, the Dark Ages, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Romantic period, postmodern, modernism, a lot of these guys might not understand why the name Renaissance. What does it mean for the viewers that don't understand those times, maybe not historically inclined?
Yeah, so that's an awesome question, actually, and one that I should probably spend more time answering in my own work. So I found my way into the dialogue about masculinity in 2013 with an organization called the Mankind Project, which was a weekend men's initiation. And that was a really powerful introduction to lots of inner aspects of masculinity, inner transformation, inner healing, stuff like that. And on that weekend, I saw that there are all these different kinds of men, again, of all ages. Like there were men as young as like 18 or 22 years old, all the way up to 70 years old, 50 men being initiated, that came in seeming very different. And as the weekend went along, it's like we're all dealing with different versions of the same things, and we all walked out as brothers. And so that was the beginning of my exploration of the discussion of masculinity. And then 5 years later, I discovered the manosphere and the red pill and stuff like that. And I realized that the dialogue was much, much bigger than I had realized. And so then I explored that world for a couple years, reading all the books and watching a bunch of YouTube videos. And as I looked around at everything that I had learned from everything on the inner work side, like the Mankind Project and King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and Iron John and all that stuff, and as I looked at the red pill manosphere side, I looked around at all these different guys talking about masculinity, really scattered all over the world. And I realized it was a leaderless movement. There was no single leader. All these guys were pursuing excellence and mastery in their own independent fields that didn't necessarily, they overlapped, but a little bit. Like someone else's success didn't take away from another person's, and they fed each other. It was like this creative spiral that was building from all these different men talking about these topics. And I was thinking about the different phases of it, which we'll get into. But it was really the notion that here's this energetic, creative movement talking about masculinity where all these different creators are exploring all these different aspects. No one's leading it, and they're all inspiring each other and pushing each other forward. And for some reason, that reminded me of the Italian Renaissance, which was in the 1500s and 1600s, 1400s as well. That was very much like that, where you have Da Vinci and Michelangelo and Brunelleschi and all these different guys that were pursuing this rebirth of civilization through the arts. And they were competing with each other, but not directly. It wasn't like they were all painters or all sculptors. It was multifaceted, all these different fields. And I thought that what was going on in masculinity was very similar to that. And that's why I called it the Renaissance of Men. All these different men exploring different aspects of masculinity and pushing each other to be better and inspiring others in the process. And then later I recognized that there were the multiple phases that was like the whole Renaissance process that came within a few months of the visual similarities, let's say.
That's excellent. So as you took time to sort of absorb the landscape there, and you're seeing what different guys are doing. Like say Michelangelo, he was a guy who was any kind of inventive idea, he was pouring himself out into it. And there's these sort of specialization that occurs as people see vacuums and deficits within it growing. What did you see? What did you apply yourself to as you sort of analyze the atmosphere?
That's actually another great question. You guys are killing it, by the way. So initially, I didn't think that I had a role to play in the dialogue because I had been so blessed and so benefited by men that have been talking about it for years. What I wanted to do was I kind of wanted to be the documentarian of it. I wanted to be the guy. That's the nature of my podcast. So I started the Renaissance of Men podcast. It was to interview all these different men and ultimately became women as well. And you can think of it a little bit like a gallery. So you go walking through a gallery and you see all these different paintings and you appreciate the painting and then you go to the next one. I thought of my podcast the same way, where it's like you can listen to these in-depth interviews where these leaders talk about their lives and their philosophies. And the Renaissance of Men was meant to be a gallery of the people who are actually doing it. So I've been doing that for the past 3 years. But in the process of doing that, I've discovered a lot of things. And the dialogue has changed. And, obviously you find out that men are not who they say they are and stuff like that goes on and the truth gets revealed. And there's a lot of that. But I also realized that men actually like to hear what I have to say as well. And at this point, I've cultivated enough ideas and explored them because I was trying to put the pieces together of what all these different people are doing. And in the process of putting the pieces together, my own ideas have popped out of that. And so the transition that I've been making over the course of the past year has been more focused on what is my voice and contribution going to be to this dialogue. And so Cultish has been a part of that. Me telling my story has been a part of that. And the things that I'm building now are a part of that. But I didn't start out thinking that I necessarily had anything to contribute to this giant room full of men that have been doing it much longer. In the same way that anyone, if you feel you're the new guy in the room, like, hey, everybody, I have an idea. Listen to me. Like, who the heck are you? Right. So, but fortunately, God has blessed me over the past 3 years with experiences and knowledge and insight and wisdom and reading that I have the ability to offer to men now, which has been very exciting.
Well, that's so important because when you have a burgeoning group of or guys, like just this growth that's just happening, in order to collect all the different viewpoints so that somebody's being introduced to it and is able, because now the manosphere or the red pill, there is kind of like the Pope, like Rollo Tomasi, and there's these figures that are starting to crop up that are more archetype of not like the Renaissance, but like they're trying to monetize it, and it's starting to take on a different feel, at least on the popular hawkers of red pill.
Yeah.
And so the humble job you took as being a scribe, and sort of collecting data and then being able to provide that to people as they're entering in. It saves people a lot of time because if you're just going to go in by yourself, and start trying to pick stuff out of this crazy cacophony of human beings, you're going to waste a lot of time, especially at this point in time in the red pill. So people like you are providing a very good way to people can fast track their growth and resource.
Well, and it helps with like the red pill is essentially agnostic, and so we're obviously taking the Christian side of this whole discussion. And what I'm loving to see, like Dave and I were actually talking about this in the car yesterday or the other day, that there's all these creators like you guys, some of the guys that you have on your conference, like these men pushing kind of the same ideas. It's like it's just casting this wide net of content getting out there on the internet, I think, and reaching people. Because you got the Andrew Tates, you got the red pill guys that are out there spreading content. But we need to be out there with Christ's message.
Absolutely.
And we need it in numbers. Like none of us are ever going to be big like an Andrew Tate. So you're never going to have this giant voice. I don't think it's just naturally how it's going to be. But so if we got numbers, we got 100 guys doing all what we're doing, I think, well,
you're actually helping those 100 guys, right?
Well, no, just like if you have 100, Renaissance, you got 100 wheels out there of us, of other guys that are doing the same message kind of on the internet, then you can really get a reach and make a difference.
I agree.
I agree. Because naturally our message is not going to explode like somebody like Andrew Tate. So
yeah, it's not as provocative or compelling.
We just need to keep bringing all each other up. And creating more and more of each other. So
exactly, we need to lock shields, and the information you're collecting helps us to do that. It's a resource that allows people to go into this space and not get so damaged by it before they begin to have be fruitful in it. So that's awesome, man. And so just for the listeners, maybe it's short little testimonial based on what you went through, because your testimony is so cool. And just for the viewers, Cultish is a podcast. So if you type in Cultish and then you type in his name, you will find like a nice breakdown of this. But just because I think it's important, people always want to know what brought you to the Manosphere. Like why, how do people end up here? So I think your testimony is really important to that story.
Thank you. But before I answer that question, I just want to say thank you for your assessment of what I'm doing, because it's always very validating to hear that the mission that I set out on is perceived and understood in the way that it's intended. Because what I had always wanted the Renaissance of Men to be is, if you think about the dialogue of masculinity like a mansion, like a giant mansion full of different rooms, right? I always wanted the Renaissance of Men to be like the front door or the foyer. You come in, hang up your coat, and welcome to the Renaissance of Men. Now go explore. Like, I don't want to own you. I don't want to keep you forever, because there are so many men and women now that have said so many valuable things. Go on the same journey that I went on. Don't spend too much time in any one room. Check out the backyard, go all the way around and figure it out for yourself, because everyone's working towards the same goal. So that comes across as very meaningful to me. So thank you for saying that.
No, you're welcome.
And then, so to answer the question about my testimony, here's the I'm going to go the light speed version. So born Jewish, bar mitzvahed, but grew up liberal atheist. And, but I had a hunger for God. I was made in God's image, like all of us are. And so I went to college in the Bay Area. And when I went to school in the Bay Area, I was introduced to all of the Eastern spirituality and psychology and stuff that happens in Northern California. I got into the DJ and rave scene, which is, very much about psychedelics as well. And that just kind of became my life, exploring all these different forms of spirituality, which is what the New Age is. It's a syncretist melting pot of all these different New Age ideas. And that was just how I lived. And it was in 2015 that I was coming off of a breakup. And in the Bay Area, you can just do this. I went to Burning Man because it's like 6 hours away. And so I went to Burning Man coming off this breakup, and someone recommended that I go to this Burning Man camp and get some inner healing, which is like, I'm always up for that. And there's a long story about this, but the short version is that I ended up in a 3.5 hour healing encounter with 3 people, two older women and older men. And at the end of this healing encounter, and again, there's a long story behind this. At the end of this healing encounter, I had a vision of Jesus Christ. And there's no doubt that that's what it was. And I asked these people, like, who are you? And they said, we're Christians. They had been running an underground ministry at Burning Man for 12 years.
That's so cool.
It's amazing. And so that was my introduction to Christ. But I didn't become Christian then. I did go to visit them for Christmas that year. And that was the first time I experienced a Christian Christmas. And I got to see that they were the people who they said they were. They were warm and loving and accepting. And I never felt preached at or talked down to. They were just very welcoming of me. So then after that, I traveled the world for about 4 years. And I went to South America, I went to Asia and India and Australia. And I got to do more of these New Age practices and explore Eastern spirituality, like up close and personal. But I knew about stuff like Jeffrey Epstein. I knew about that stuff. And I had real trouble reconciling this idea that the New Age world is like, evil doesn't exist. It's all subjective, right? It's everything is one, and anything you don't like is just your subjective experience. And on the fundamental level, it's all one. I'm like, really? Like, you're telling me that these kids being trafficked, it's an experience their soul needs to have? Like, really? You would look a little kid in the eye and say that to them? Or the guy who's trafficking the kids, like, that's an experience his soul needs to have? Like, no, these people are doing things that are objectively wrong. They're cosmically wrong. But no one in the Eastern spirituality world would acknowledge that or talk to me about it. They would just change the subject, which I found really annoying. And so then I got back to the US in February of 2020, and I was still in touch with the friends that I had met at Burning Man. And the day I got back to the US, one of my friends, Rob, put a book in my hand. He had shipped it to me for my birthday, Simply Christian by N.T. Wright. And I read that book, and in the first third or so of that book, maybe in the midway point, the author has this image where he says, Christ up on the cross, in his death and sacrifice, this giant wave of evil came to crash over him, but his death and sacrifice drove back the wave of evil forever. and I read that this is all as COVID is happening again, which I didn't buy from the beginning. Like, this looks pretty bad. And I saw this image of Christ's death driving back the wave of evil, and I got it. And then I read Mere Christianity and Screw Tape Letters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so, because those were the only 2 books about Christianity that I knew, and it really landed for me.
Those are some good books to like. If I had 2 books to show somebody, I'd be like, these are some good ones, man.
Yeah, they're still the ones.
Right.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
They're still the ones that I do. So it was after that I asked my friends to baptize me in Labor Day of 2020. And so I didn't really know what I was signing up for. Like, it's not like I knew what sanctification and regeneration was. I didn't have the understanding of Christianity that I do now. But it felt very much like the right thing to do, that I was ready to take this step. And it was very much the right thing to do, and I was ready to take the step. So here I am now.
So how does red pill work into that?
So I had the 2 subjects that I've been studying the longest with my own desire and my own experience has been religion and spirituality, which basically started around my bar mitzvah, so about 30 years now. And then in 2020, when I was living in the Bay Area, I was in college, and I took a class on Jungian psychology. And in that class, they talked about what the Lord of the Rings has to say about masculinity and about the inner life of men.
Yeah, that is cool, dude.
It's really amazing. And that's when I realized that I had grown up. I didn't grow up like an outdoorsy kid. I was an indoors kid, really great at school, not very athletic, and I just thought that because I didn't like pizza and beer and stuff like that, or I was never invited into the fraternities, that there was something broken about me.
Oh, wow.
And then when I read that, like, broken about me as a man, and then when I took that class, I was like, no, there's nothing broken about me at all. I'm also a man. Well, what does that actually mean? So then I set out on a 20-year journey to understand that. And so Christianity and the red pill masculinity journeys for me, they collided, dovetailed in 2020 when I started the Renaissance of Men. So that's how those two things fit together in my life. And now
that is so powerful, and it's a perfect segue to talking about the issues we see in the church right now.
Yeah.
And how the men are dropping the ball, and the religious cultural implications of manhood nowadays has taken a back seat to the culture that's secular. And we've seen the churches as a result suffer very deeply because the men aren't doing their jobs and they're not identifying in the biblical Christ-like masculinity that we are entitled to, and that should be our driving force, that we should be overcoming the secular culture with. We should be bringing dignity and nobility to the world by virtue of this. So can you describe, as you said, this red pill, or the discovery and desire to discover what manhood is, has been a constant through your life? I mean, as soon as you were like sentient and thinking, how that's changed now that you came to the faith, luckily, after having a lot of experience. I mean, lucky for us, because you've had a lot of experience in the secular world. And so that experience is so precious, because now you can go into the church and say, what's going on here?
Well, I think you got the unique view of it too, because like all of us, we grew up in the church.
Yeah.
So you didn't grow up in the church, and so you get to enter the church, later in life, and you're like probably like, we're blind to a lot of stuff, I think, just because it's the culture
100%,
and like we got our blinders on. So you have this unique view coming in later that I think
I'd love to hear about that, because like you're reading the Bible for the first time. You have your relationship with Christ, and then you enter into the church and you're like, okay, there's a short circuit in here. What do you see that's not adding up?
Yeah, it's a great question. Man, where to begin with that? So it is something that I've observed, that people who have grown up in the church, they're not able to see the very subtle and insidious ways that culture has infiltrated Christianity. Like, I can see it because I've had to, purify myself from it. I've had to detoxify from it. And I've continued doing that. I continue, like, just this past weekend over 4th of July, I cleaned out my storage unit. I cleaned out some boxes, and I found all this pagan stuff, and I burned it and smashed it all. It was very
good.
Cool.
Smash it. Don't sell it. Destroy it.
No, I don't want. I just want it to not exist anymore.
Exactly.
Like, I literally
kill it.
Really? Like I found a stone Ganesh statue, that Hindu god, hammer, smash.
That's what I did too, man. I got the hammer out, smashed that piece of crap. I was like, nobody's getting this. I don't care if it's expensive. It's dying today.
Dying today. It's going away forever. Exactly. So the thing is, I can spot all these things. Now, I can spot them not just in like a pagan, cult, New Age kind of thing where Gnosticism has infected the church. Like I can see that, but I can also see the ways in which effeminacy has really infiltrated the church, and that's the really difficult thing, because along with effeminate men, you have masculinized women. The two go together, and so a lot of guys in the masculinity space are beginning to really challenge men within the church to step up.
Good.
I think that's a very difficult battle to fight, because they need to hear it from their pastors too. And their pastors are not particularly masculine men. Like they're just not going to listen to some guy sitting next to them in the pew. They'll vibe check their pastor to see where their pastor's at with that. That's another conversation. But another one of the really big problems, this is an enormous problem, this is going to be a huge fight, is how masculinized the women are. And the thing is, you're not going to be able to get men to step up into the men that they can be unless they have a wife who wants to rely on them and lean on them for support and call them forward to that. And so what I'm seeing in a lot of churches, you have a lot of girls, maybe their fathers are Christian, maybe not, who knows? But the girls are like, why should I be getting married? I shouldn't be thinking about that. I want to live my life. I want to go to college. And you have all these young guys that if they felt the call, if they had a wife to support, that they would actually have to step up to be something. But you have effeminate men and masculinized women, and it's ripping the church apart, and pastors are afraid to say anything about it. They will gladly, now I'm going to hurt some feelings. They will gladly get up in front of the pulpit and tell all the men they got to work on pornography and stuff like that. But where's the sermons where they say, young ladies, I know you want to go to college and that everyone in your life tells you that you should have a career. You need to be preparing for marriage. Because if pastors don't start saying that, they're going to lose the next generation. And we're seeing it. We're seeing
Get
it.
an amen, baby.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
No one wants to challenge the almighty woman. And I know why they don't want to challenge the almighty woman. They don't want to challenge the almighty woman because a couple reasons. Churches are run by female administrators, so that they know if they get up and they start preaching a message that upsets the women.
Castration.
That's right, castration. Maybe the women won't show up to work on Monday and the church falls apart. Or maybe God forbid, the pastors are dealing with secret sin and their wife knows, or who knows? I don't want to, none of this is meant to say, any accusations anywhere. It's just to say that, look, if we need masculine leadership within the church, masculine leadership means that women follow. And in order for women to follow, women need to be prepared to follow. And the only way that happens is women have to acknowledge that they need to take a step back, and men need to acknowledge that they need to take a step forward. And I'm not seeing that happen yet. Now, that doesn't mean it won't. And what you said about the red pill, and Andrew Tate, about never getting a voice like Andrew Tate, you might be right about that. But the thing is, I think we will have much more success preaching a message of masculinity to the Christian world than we will preaching the message of Christianity to the masculinity world. So that's been my shift in focus over the past couple months. It's like, as I'm trying to bring Christianity into the red pill space, the amount of pushback and vitriol and hatred and active personal slander that I'm getting is like, you know what? Fine. Enjoy hell. I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to these guys in these churches, these Christian men that actually have a framework to build their worldview off of. And I'm going to start lifting them up with the energy that I have. And I'm finding there's a lot of energy for that. That's just beginning to build. That will, again, run up against the masculinized women. That fight will happen. The divine feminine is in the Christian church, and it's in the rebellious hearts and spirits of women. And that's going to be a confrontation. I don't think they have a ground to stand on, but that will happen. But in the meantime, we can raise up godly men. And so that's been what my focus is.
That's great.
I think
great.
So we were going to, as far as the order of operation, we were going to kind of hit the obesity topic here. But I think since we're on the other topic, why don't we play your viral reel here?
Yeah.
And since we're on the topic of women in the church, and
cue that up.
we'll switch the order of things here. And Dave, why don't you get that played up?
Thank you, Dave.
I'm so jealous you have a producer.
We're so lucky, blessed. And not only that,
Pretty typical when you would do marriage counseling. You would sit down with people and you're like, okay, the guys, more recently,
Now you start. Okay, cool.
talking to an older pastor. He said 15 years ago, it was pretty typical when you would do marriage counseling. You would sit down with people and you're like, okay, the guys. More recently, he said, I feel like it's almost completely flipped. He said, I have these ladies who are like, I want a divorce. What's going on? Is he hitting you? No, he provides well for me. Oh, what are you upset about? He's not emotionally available like I would want him to be. And the pastor said to me, he was like, I've gotten so sick of it where it's like these women actually have nothing to complain about. He was just coming to the red pill moment, but he goes, Eric, I think a lot of these women are actually the problem. And I was like, yeah, you have a culture who has told women that they don't sin. College professor asked the class, like, what are men's sins? And they're like, oh, men are angry, abusive, alcoholics. Like, people are just rattling them off. They're like, what are women's sins? It's like quiet for like 2 minutes. And then finally somebody's like, low self-esteem? Your biggest sin is that you don't love yourself enough. But that's what we've taught our women. So then you get into marriage counseling. You have a woman in a marriage who doesn't think that she sins. And then there was a whole complementarian movement for so long that was like, hey, if there's any marriage problems, it's the husband's fault. If you're just telling guys, no matter what happens, it's your fault, who is there to actually balance out the scales and say to the ladies, no, you are a naggy wife. I wouldn't want to be around you either. You're disrespectful. You're rude to everybody. Yes, your marriage is going to be miserable. You need to repent of that. That's horrible.
Powerful stuff, man.
You know, and you had on that guy that wrote that book, right?
The Abusive Wife.
Yeah, and because I listened to a podcast with that guy, and I think this conversation, it reminded me of the, Robert Glover's book too, the Nice Guy book, on like it's both sides of the problem, obviously, but I think it stems from the men I feel like that are being described were the nice guys out of Robert Glover's book, by the guy that wrote the other one. And so I think and that's what the blue pill essentially trains young men in the Christian sphere growing up, is like to be this doormat, nice guy, Christian guy, and then they end up in marriages that we're describing here now.
Yeah, spineless, diseased, has no. You're not gonna. I mean, his DNA is shut off. Spiritual DNA is just denied.
Yeah.
From yeah.
And
go ahead.
And however, from a Christian perspective, she still has to submit to him. This is the point that I try to push very often. Is in the garden, it was Eve was rebellious, Adam was passive. Right? That's what happened. Eve was not rebellious because Adam was passive. Like, these were two completely independent sins. This was Eve's sin nature and Adam's sin nature pre-fall, right? So yes, you can have men that are very passive, and that is something to be worked with. But women aren't rebellious because men are passive. Women are rebellious because that is their unique sin nature that they are also responsible and accountable for before God for taming. I really have to push that point, because now I'm not saying you guys, a lot of the intersexual dynamics guys like, no, you have to do this. It's like, no. Jesus came to save women too, right? That's really, really important. All through the New Testament, you have sinning women. There's no reason given or even explanation of what their sin is, but he died for their sins too. And so to say that women's sin nature is somehow dependent on men's, they interact, but they're completely independent phenomena, so that Jesus died for women too. So
Yeah.
I always need to push that.
Yeah, and we make their circumstances worse because we are the leaders by nature. I think of a interesting parallel. I was talking to a friend about kids, and nowadays a very similar situation is occurring between parents and kids, where they're letting their kids lead instead of allowing their duties as parents to take hold and lead the kid. So what happens is the kid's looking for boundaries, and they have anxiety because they want to know the boundaries, and their parents are supposed to be there to show them where the boundaries are. And there's that moment of contention, like you were saying, with the masculine female, which we will get into. A little war happens when they find the boundary and they test it. But then the anxiety is quelled and they have peace afterwards because the parent has done their job. And so we as men, as leaders, we are going to go into that war phase, which you're contending against a spirit of pride and arrogance. You're contending against the same spirit that denies truth, because they have this unfortunate disease in their mind where they see submitting to their husband in this way as like the egalitarian approach of values somehow being compromised, because their idea of submission means less than, or I'm being disrespected, or this is women being subjugated by man, and on and on and on.
Talking about the patriarchy, but if she's a Christian woman, the dominance hierarchy within the Bible is men are in submission to Christ, the wife is in submission to the man, and the kids are in submission to the parents that are united. The two become one flesh. And that's the type of submission that is, the two are becoming one flesh. She would be absolutely in support of that hierarchy because it's what we have been told is the correct hierarchy in the Bible.
A believing woman should be, if she sees her husband broken and completely not leading, having these just no spiritual masculinity, that should be her petition to the Lord in her prayers. But you're not seeing that. So you don't have a spirit, unfortunately, in the church, the feminine spirit.
What you're saying is a man is not in submission to Christ.
Right, yeah. So like
But they're using it, it's like optional. Like, I will submit to the man if he's doing his role perfectly. And that's, I think, the problem.
Well, that is the problem, because how do you describe that? So if you have a woman in there talking to her counselor, and she's like, I don't feel like my husband is a good leader, or he is not in submission to Christ the way that I think he should be. I think there's some basic questions that should be asked, like, does this man pray every day? Is he how much of his day is used up by praying and going for the Lord with his time? If that is answered in a way that this guy is actually putting time into his relationship, then submission is a funny thing. This is where the word submission is going to offend people, but you submit not because you know it's right. You submit because you don't, either right or wrong. Submission is not qualified by whether or not you agree with that person. You submit despite that. And that's what submission is. And so submission can only start with humility to God's word for the precedence of relationship that is supposed to be there. So in many ways, and this is as we're thinking this out, because in the beginning of this discussion, we used to sort of default to, well, the men are not proper leaders. So a lot of the time I could see a wife saying, well, my man's a loser, spineless piece of crap. This guy's a loser. So she doesn't have to submit. But if she starts to submit despite the deficit of his spiritual relationship with God, I'm sure that would inspire and challenge the man to step it up.
That's I don't know if you've heard of the page, Will, Don't Become Roommates. I can't remember the lady's name.
Yes.
I saw her talking about this on Kaz TV's or on his Instagram live, on how, like, I think Ephesians 5, it's like, it says first for wives to submit to their husbands. There's no clauses in there like, is he like leading you properly, blah, blah, blah. It's like first there's the submission, and then it's his job for leadership. Neither side have these clauses like, well, if I'm only going to lead if she submits to me, and vice versa. Like, these are commands by God, and there's an order to this.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to throw in this. I want to throw in something that's really important about this that is a hidden dimension, which is the absence and abdication of fathers. So what you have, the reason why we're here is the situation. It didn't come out of nowhere. It didn't just arrive in 2020. What we have is a multi-generational failure of fatherhood, 2 or 3 generations. Mostly it's the fathers of Gen X, millennials, and after. So which I think is probably baby boomers for the most part. So what you have is you have fathers who, and it's so complicated. You have fathers who raise their sons not to be accomplished, but to get good jobs. You're going to go work for the system in some way, and you're not ever going to learn what it is to provide for yourself. Getting a job is not the same thing as creating value. You go become part of something larger than yourself, and you just kind of merge into the collective, right? And money gets provided for you if you show up to work every day. Now, what the corporate world did is this was what I was subjected to, but I'm a giant pain in the ass, so I didn't deal well with it. It hammers off all the rough edges. It sands off all the rough edges and all the energy of men, because you have to fit into this collectivized, neutered kind of environment that's welcoming to women. So you disciple men not to become entrepreneurs, to become hunters. You disciple them to be giant collective farmers, right? So you get all these soft men at these corporate jobs. And on the other side of it, what do you have? You have men that have been so taken because they came of age during the 1960s, during feminism, during the feminist outrage. Like, I would never dare tell my daughter to be anything less than, than queen of the universe. Or I would never tell my daughter to get ready for marriage and a husband. Like, oh dear, why would I? Like, you go, girl. You get your career and you be successful and you be professional. And that's what the roles that the fathers have been doing within the Christian church. So they've raised up generations of soft men and hard women. And this has come right up to today, where when you meet young girls under the age of 30, especially Christian girls, and you talk to them, they'll tell you, when they say to their friends and family members that they want to be wives and mothers, they get universal pushback. Well, that's not a career. What are you talking about? You want to be a wife and mother? No, you should be going to college. And this is within the Christian church. And so the way that this fits into the rebellion aspect is that what was Eve tempted by? Eve was tempted by the words, and ye shall be like God. Eve was tempted by vanity and her own power, and Adam was tempted by Eve. That same temptation is being run out to women and has been run out to them for the past 150 years, since feminism, basically. And you shall be like God. And so women buy into that temptation. What does that temptation also do? That temptation also leads them to rebel from the family, to rebel from God and Christ and their own husbands. Rebellion is built in. That's God's curse. Your desire will be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. And ye shall be like God. Rebellion is wanting to rebel against God's created order as part of who women are. Now, men have their own sin nature, which is abdication and passivity. So no one gets out of this conversation free. But rebellion is part of women's nature, and that's what Christ died for. Christ died for that sin nature so they can nail it to the cross and suffer the pain. It grates against their very sin nature, the pain of submission. And you have 150 years of feminist theology that women are eternal victims that need to rise in power and take over, that's been cultivated within the church. And so relative to the conversation of like me coming in from the outside and looking around in so many different churches and so many different environments and seeing like, hey, that feminism thing is destroying the world. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, but Elon Musk, a year ago, something like that, someone asked him if he was concerned about population explosion. And he gave a really counterintuitive reply. He said, actually, I'm kind of worried about population collapse, but he didn't elaborate. And so as anyone within the dating pool right now can probably tell you, the number of marriageable age girls that have their sights set on actually being wives and mothers and sacrificing their careers is very, very small. They figure it out roughly around the age of like 32, right? Like
Epiphany stage.
Epiphany stage. It's getting later. Like women used to hit their epiphany stage at 30. Now it's like 32, 33. There are girls like, I want to have seven kids. And they're saying it at age 33, right? And the reason why that happened is their fathers didn't tell them, you should probably start thinking about, and they're still not, you should start thinking about being a wife and mother. So I think we're going to see a massive drop off in birth rates because no one is going to tell these girls, you need to let your dreams go now. Because otherwise there isn't going to be a Christian church in the next generation.
What's interesting is you say dreams, but it sounds like the unconscious of these women. And I would also throw this ball right back to a lot of the red pill men. These red pill men, especially when Rollo, he did like 10 points on Twitter, and everyone above what a high value male should do at his younger age, and he had brought in vasectomy. He got a bunch of pushback on that. And I thought it elucidated the unconscious desire for these men to have families. Because otherwise, why not? Cut your nuts off, make $1 million, bang a bunch of hoes. Why do you need kids, dude? You don't. You don't really want that. But they do. So it's you like struck an unconscious nerve. And these epiphany stage with these women, I believe is the same thing. You say it's a dream for a career, but that's more mimetic desire. That's just what the world is telling these women and social media and the Cosmopolitan magazine, these all this influence.
And their parents.
Their parents are telling them this is what they want, so this becomes the dream. But unconsciously, when they reach a certain age, their biological clock is ticking, they realize that they actually do want to have kids and they actually do want a family, right? So that's like the unconscious dream. That is the true dream, right?
They're suppressing that desire in their younger years.
Yes.
In their most fertile years, in the years that we've forever had children. Like, they're having to suppress those desires today.
Yeah.
And it's like the one thing that I think the church, like, I think Rollo talks about this too, is all these women at like 30 who are now running back to the church in their epiphany stage as well, because that's another aspect of it, I think. Because a lot of the girls, I'm sure you've seen this, Will, like, they kind of leave the faith in their early 20s, or they very loosely follow it. And then when 29 shows up, now they're back at church. Now they care deeply about it. Now they're posting all their stories full of Bible verses and stuff and looking for the guy to have a family with.
But a lot of those guys don't want to have sex and begin families with these women that have these pasts.
Exactly.
That they
and
just don't. They're not aligning with the woman that she is at 32, because the woman that she was all through her 20s was someone very different.
Yeah, the men like us, we don't want to marry a girl in that circumstance.
I don't want that history to be
We want
involved.
the young girl. We, frankly want a virgin girl. I would say most Christian men.
10 years is a long time.
And so it's like this cycle that's going over and over again. And I was thinking, like, if I had a daughter right now, I'd be like, don't go to university. I will support you till you find a man that is a quality provider, protector for you. And, like, don't go chase this career, because I know it won't fulfill you.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, we all want to have families and legacy. And I think the massive lie and the deception of this dream of this sensuality and basically this hedonism that has been sold to this generation, and has also started off with the end of the modernism kind of took over, and people were thinking there was an identity crisis. You could just put this piece over here. You could just make a man a woman. You can just make, you can just change things around and assemble it however you desire, whatever makes you feel good. There's no right or wrong within this assembly of different parts and pieces. And the gestalt, the whole of life, the purpose of life. You go through any type of any monotheistic religion, or even the polytheistic, has been rooted within monogamy, usually, and then starting a family, and then having this legacy go on of this is your history, or shared history. This is where you come from. This is where you are now, and then this is going to be your shared future, a personalized shared future with the people that are around you, so you can have this legacy that can procure. That is being shattered. No one cares about where you came from. The history of people don't care about it. Therefore, they don't know where they are, and they can't properly assess what to do in the moment to have a future for themselves. It's all based on the sensuality and this mimetic desire, as Gerard talks about, of the influence of the world, and then they're finding themselves very lost. And not, they have no purpose at the end of the day.
Well, there's certain preconditions that are necessary in order to develop and qualify, understand, value what a legacy is. And so when a young person's in their late teens and they're imagining the hedonism, what they want to do, that's from the mind frame of that undeveloped mind. There's not enough preconditions that have been met to have them develop to the point where they can even understand what legacy is. And that's incumbent upon the parents to instill and inoculate in their children the sense of duty that's involved with the family that they're coming from. So if their family environment is a source of confidence, of pride, the parents have given their kids a way to come up against the cultural pressures and to have dignity and nobility and standing in that, and to be connected to their family and have roots in their family rather than everywhere else, they are going to be able to understand the duty that they have in their early 20s, instead of getting all torn up and destroyed and then in their 30s have to deal with the wake of ashes and then try and catch up and catch up and catch up.
Yep.
But that's why it starts with the kids, because they are so malleable. And they're put in the position as the parent, the leader.
Well, as JR said, fathers were replaced by the state, and that is the condition we are in this moment.
Yeah.
Do you see a way out of this, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I do. The way that I am going about it is, I do a lot of content for women on my page, and I get a lot of, in fact, my stories yesterday, they're gone now, but if you go to my Instagram profile, it's just at Ren of Men, and you look on the highlights and you look at the first set of highlights, which is called The Vessels. And you can see a series of stories that are based on that Eric Kahn reel that you showed, where people were coming onto the comments and they're just calling me a misogynist. And the funny thing about that is 4 of my most popular posts of all time are the most honoring things that anyone could probably write about women, in a really positive way, highlighting their really positive qualities that weren't necessarily obvious, like women smile, right? Like how powerful that is for men. And we don't ever hear about that. How what she can't see, about how women are really blinded when it comes to seeing men's honor, which is why otherwise good girls fall in with bad boys. That's because they maybe have a sense that this is not an honorable man, but they're kind of blinded by sexual desire, so they need to find a sheepdog, like a man around them that can say, that dude right there, don't go mess with that guy. Fathers are supposed to do that, but a lot of women don't have that. So you're finding neighbors. So it's just all these things that are able to speak directly into the heart of women. And so that charge for me doesn't land. You can't call me, especially because I did the digital conference with those 7 female creators, which was the last edition that I did. So that charge doesn't land with me. And so what I said in the series, in that series of stories, was like, look, if this is how I concluded it. Women are the vessel, the doorway, and the cradle of life itself. Children, right? Wives and mothers. If that's not enough for you, nothing will be. And if that makes me a misogynist for saying that, so be it. And
Well, I think important things on earth are people.
Yeah.
that's right.
That
That was the deal.
Yes.
Men built civilization with our hands and with our bodies and with our heads and our minds. And that was how we built all of this. And what do women do? Women's contribution is they make people, right?
Cannot be
more
understated.
important.
Yeah.
Right. We wouldn't build all this if it weren't for all these people. But women are like, yeah, I don't need to make people anymore. I need to use my sexuality for my own pleasure, not procreation. I need to use my time and my energy to make money, not to make a home.
Yeah.
And there's no one out there that's willing to say that. And that's why I call this the year of hurt feelings, because I'm willing to say that. Your father, it's like, ladies, your fathers didn't say that to you. That was a mistake. Your pastors are not saying that. They're terrified to say that to you. That's a mistake. You know who Doug Wilson is?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the reason why Doug Wilson is so hated, he inspires this irrational hatred, this jovial, jolly, 70-year-old man. He inspires irrational hatred. It's crazy. And I think it's because a little similar in nature, but not character, to someone like Donald Trump or Jordan Peterson, these men inspire irrational hatred in women, because I think they feel within these men, or at least Jordan Peterson, Donald Trump, who they were years ago, like back in 2016, they felt this masculine energy that they can't control. Yeah. Like here's guys we can't control. Doug Wilson's the same. And he says this stuff. We need more pastors like Doug Wilson.
When you touch a really infected wound, the people flinch.
Yeah.
There is a visceral reaction to trying to protect it because they don't understand what's going to happen next. They need to have faith first in the process of healing. And I think that ties back to the issue that I see being critical. And that's in the church, the understanding of our sacred nomenclature defining value being secularized. Mm-hmm. And that goes to the definition of man and woman. So our biblical version of hierarchy is very important to understand. Mm-hmm. Our biblical version of what you're supposed to do as a man and a woman are very important to understand. And that satanic backlash you're going to encounter is a real thing. And it's an indicator that you are speaking truth. Mm-hmm. We had a buddy of ours on, his name's Zach, and he talks about some pretty inflammatory stuff. And we've noticed in our own lives that there are people you will talk to, and because their ideology is so deeply embedded in who they are, they just see hate, they see red, no matter what it is you say to them. Mm-hmm. It's like they're trying to protect that festering wound no matter what.
Disagreement is hate.
So what I was starting to come to the forefront in me is just trying to see the agency in moving forward. Is you're supposed to have the conversations with people. You're supposed to explain, and you're supposed to teach. You're supposed to pastor. But the way that I see the church changing is by men making radical moves who have understood and preserved the sacred nomenclature that informs our spirit how to move forward. And we need to make radical moves in our own lives. And that's going to incite that mimetic, spiritual mimetic desire, the proper mimetic desire, that's how the church has always been reconciled to its evils. And so it's not that we stop the dialogue. The dialogue needs to continue, not be surprised by the satanic backlash, because they will respond with hate every single time you bring it up. There's seeds that are planted that in hindsight, as it works retroactively, they will see. But being able to have a family where they look at you during dinner and they see your kids respecting the parents, they see a well-maintained garden in that family, that will create desire in them. And that's something they cannot ignore. They can ignore, they can straw man, they can take arguments, turn them inside out, and that is something they can't ignore. And I see that those are the small little beginnings that are going to ramify the quality of a family that we have forgotten. We have forgotten what those families look like. We have forgotten what obedient kids, respectful kids look like. We have forgotten the beauty that is, and people will see that beauty. They will be attracted to that beauty. It will rapture their spirit. And that is, I think we're at that point in many ways where the dialogue, it needs to happen. We need to continue speaking about it. But that's to talk to the younger men and the men who are waking up to red pill, so that they put their efforts and their energy in the right place. So, because my fear is they scapegoat on the arguments. They scapegoat, and then their family is still not changing. They still don't have a wife that's submitting. The conditions in their family are still the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a mess, and it's really a shame to see. But what I like about what you guys are doing is, and what I like about what you just said, is that there's as much telling as we can do. We can tell all day long. We can write books and create content. But the really important thing is to show. And that's what I really appreciate about what you guys are doing, is that you show. Like you don't just talk about a brain in a box stuff, right? There's room for theological discussions, but you guys actually embody what it is that you hope to promote within the church. And that's really, really important. And I know that, you're from your perspective, having grown up in the church, there's a lot of work to do. But as far as I can tell, you guys are doing a great job, because you've held on and cultivated your values, and you're continuing to push them forward. And that's the thing that I think is really important. Young men need to see, you're welcome. Young men need to see it. And that's, I think, ultimately why Andrew Tate was so compelling originally. It was that, look, he's got the money, he's got the girls, he's got the body, he's got the car, he's got all the stuff. It's like he can show to people that don't necessarily have discernment to be able to see spiritual values, which I think we've all lost in various ways. They're like, well, this guy has all the things that I want intuitively, instinctively, but he doesn't believe any of the things that I believe. But when I look at the people who believe the things that I believe, they have none of the things that I want. I want these things, right? Yeah. That's why he was really successful. And so I think that the Christian, the young man, masculine Christian response to that, including you guys, including Chase, Sovereign Bra, Brandon from Masculine Revival, who'd probably be another great guest for your podcast, has been really powerful. And it's really, really needed, even though Brandon didn't grow up in the church. But it's been really needed. So kudos to you guys for doing the work with your heads and your hearts and your bodies as well.
Thank you, dear brother.
And we don't embody, like, that's the thing. We all gotta hold each other's feet to the fire because we don't have families yet. Like, so we
have dogs.
Yeah, we can't lead by example in all areas. But this might be a good segue to the next topic. Is we try to really show that masculine Christian men can be fit, can be strong, can embody should be. It's like, I would say nearly a requirement. Mm-hmm. And you have done quite a bit of, I'd say, writing on the topic of obesity and just kind of being unhealthy within the church, and how, we were talking about that the other day. Like, how can you as a man, especially if you are one of these men that do have it together, go take like a sermon or a message from someone up on the stage who has, you can tell they just have nothing together. They're just overweight, obese, and you got to take this person seriously. Like there's this element of respect that's even just hard to have.
Yeah.
And
It's not like Roosevelt standing with his his braces on. It's not like that.
No.
It's like this person was out of control for a lot of their life.
yeah, and so yeah. Anyway, I'll let you take it from there on kind of what some of those. You have a bunch of Instagram reels on this topic that we'll probably put in the description. But yeah.
Yeah, I did a series of posts called Obesity, Christianity, and Relationships on Instagram. So like carousels, text on carousels. And what I have observed is that when you try and tell people within the church that you shouldn't be obese because it's gluttony, it doesn't land. Like it should land, but for some reason it doesn't land. I don't know why, but it's, whatever. So I was like, well, what's an angle that I can come at this from that will land with people in a way that they can't deny, both men and women? And the angle that I came at it from in this series of posts is that if you're obese, you are failing in your godly ordained duties as a husband, as a wife, or as a potential husband and wife. So let's take it from the angle. Let's take it from the angle of a husband first, because that's a little bit easier. A husband is called to be what? Protector, provider, prophet, and priest, right? Those are Vodi Bachum's 4, I think. So like, how are you going to tell me that you're going to be able to protect your family if you can't run, 100 yards, right? You're not going to be able to protect your family, right? And I said, like, the firearm on your hip is not the answer.
Yeah, zombie apocalypse. You're going to run out of ammo, and you're going to be the shish kebab, baby, fat one. They're going for you.
Yeah, and then protect, and then provider. Look, if you're carrying around an extra 50 pounds, if you're carrying around extra 20 pounds, you notice a difference in your subjective state of well-being and your energy level. But 50 pounds, 80 pounds, you are not the provider that you could be, because you're dragging and you're eating crap food too. So you're not being the protector you could be, the provider, that is. Prophet. What does a prophet do? A prophet represents God to his family. That's what a prophet does. So what are you representing of God? Like, is this how God designed the human body to look? Like, is that what you're literally embodying? And what is a priest? A priest represents the family to God, going the other way. This is all Vodi Bachum, by the way. So are you if you're not properly leading your family in this way, how can you represent your family before God? If you are overweight as a man, you are failing in your God-ordained duties as a husband, as a father, or as a potential husband and father. And the same is for women, right? Women are supposed to care for children. If you're carrying around an extra 60 or 80 pounds, you will not have the energy to care for your kids that you can. You will not be able to bear kids. If you're pregnant, you're putting the child in your womb at risk. You're not triggering your husband's sexual desire. Right? People who are fat and overweight they have reduced testosterone, and they have increased cortisol, which decreases sexual desire. And so if you're not having sex as a couple, your relationship is fraying at the most fundamental emotional level.
Yep.
And you have 2 fat parents, you have fat kids, which is child abuse. And so that people aren't listening to gluttony, which they should listen to, fine. I'm going to give it to you straight. This is what you're doing. And I pissed a lot of people off, and I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't make the rules. Here's the rules. The rules are in here. You can look in this book.
Yeah.
And
well, what's even I think more funny is you mentioned gluttony. I've never heard a sermon on gluttony before. Have you? Like they rarely even bridge that topic.
Yeah, I think there was one recently, but no one wants to tackle it.
They make jokes about how they're obviously obese. I'll hear that on the pulpit a lot, and everybody's kind of like, oh, yeah, we're all fat whales. What are you going to do? Maybe try something next year. I don't know. They don't really have a response that says it's a critical situation. It's more like a funny one, like we're all just happy, fat, jolly people kind of a situation. And it's pathetic.
They're
It's
addicted
pathetic.
to food. I mean, that's what it
addicted.
is. These guys, everyone's eating and they're satiating their sensuality and this desire with food. That's what they're doing. It's acceptable, and the church is fine with it. And it's a great example of like, these are our temples. These are our temples.
Yes.
You're beyond. It's going to crap, right? So are the churches, right? The churches themselves are going to crap, right? And it's just a great representation and correlative between the physical person, the people that are these obese people that are going to the church, and the actual church itself and its ability to actually be in submission to Christ, which means doing the hard things and self what's it called?
Self-denial.
Self-humiliation, but being able to put yourself in a
Self-discipline.
pain position and sacrifice, discipline, willpower. You know, that's what's indicative of having a good body.
That inculcates it in you. You have
Right.
to adapt to it.
You're used to it.
Bring up that cause this was a good. I had this devil's advocate comment actually written down myself on the pushback.
Oh, you know it's
This is
coming.
I climb through the. I know he means it, but like I want to hit.
It's like,
people
what
just
about
so
those Jordans you got on, bro?
I know.
Huh? What
But-
about what about that new car? Okay, my
Yeah.
body is my Ferrari. Deal with it.
Okay, I want to respond. I know that JR means it satirically, but I want to respond. And you guys know this. The response to this is that the amount of effort required to actually be in a position where you will feel vain about your body is years. How long does it take to get, like, if you were to start from obese, let's say, if you were to start from 25% body fat, 30%, how many years would it take to get to the point where you have visible abs without being on a crazy diet? 3 years?
2 to 3, yeah.
Probably.
3 years. Yeah,
4
okay.
years for most people, if you're being honest.
Yeah, exactly. So like the amount, it's like the guys who say like, I don't want to lift weights because I don't want to get too big. Like you're not going to like stumble out of the gym. You know.
I hear that
say
from women. Yeah.
Women say that all the time.
I'm gonna get so
I'm
bulky.
gonna look like Ronnie Coleman if I
like,
she just touch
Go
a
to the
dumbbell.
gym.
You know what I mean? It's like, God. give me a break, baby.
It's mega Christian cope.
You
It is
only
mega
wish.
Christian cope, and I'm gonna do a whole series on Instagram. I'd like to about the Christian cope things like that. Like,
Oh, dude,
Well,
we'll plug it.
And
We'll
then
plug it.
to add
Okay.
to that, it's like if you are in a marriage or a relationship, it's like I feel like it's part of your responsibility to remain attractive to your spouse.
Look at the
Like I
birds of
said-
paradise,
like
man.
you said,
God made those things, and they are gorgeous, and they show their beauty to each other to woo them, to make the mating process
say-
more interesting. Like, come on, dude, we do this stuff. There's mating rituals. There's a beauty involved with being presentable to your spouse and taking diligence with that you're just not experiencing. You're not having that with you. When your wife takes off her clothes, you are not inspired, man. And when you see your clothes come off, you are just depressed. Let's be honest. So if you're
lights
not,
off.
let's be
There's
honest.
no amount of Viagra that's gonna
There's
remedy
none.
that situation.
Now, what
that's
I
why
would
men
say
turn to
is
porn.
maybe where the vanity comes in is if you're doing this to get attention from someone that's not your spouse, then okay, we're entering space.
Well,
that
if you're
should
not
be-
married, that's okay.
yeah, if you are married though, so I could, that's where those lines I think could be. But yeah, if
But
you're
taking it the other direction, it's like then
Well,
you're not
and then-
inspiring. Your sex with your spouse is like the most special.
Yeah.
Like what would you say is like the cornerstone? I forgot what the specific.
it's the
word you
glue in
used.
the relationship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
what it really is.
And
Yeah.
like if let's say the dude does kind of keep it together and his wife lets herself go, that could potentially push him into porn.
Yes.
And that
1,000%.
I think is partially also a sin as far as making your brother stumble.
I see that
Except-
so often. man.
especially either
Good
if she's
point,
withholding sex or if she's so undesirable now to him that
He doesn't even want it.
he doesn't even want it. Like
It's
that's
inviting that dysfunction. into
inviting
your
it in.
relationship. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
We have
sin.
to be.
yeah.
You have to be careful. We have to be careful about that because she doesn't cause his sin
Right,
the same
right.
way that he doesn't cause hers. But yeah, like if a woman I think it's abandonment. I consider a woman who lets herself go, after pregnancy to be abandoning her husband. Well, I had the kids. He can't go anywhere. He can't divorce me.
That's
so
messed up, dude.
I think that's exactly what it is.
But it's
the
also
same-
like because a woman, and this, if like with my wife, like I know that she needs to feel attractive. She needs to know she's attractive. She needs to feel attractive.
Mhm.
And there are some people out there, the aesthetic value, which is a general thing, and I'm sorry, and that might piss people off, but there is a sort of standard to beauty that exists, okay? And it has everything to do with the natural law. You see a Ferrari. I asked my dad, why does that thing look so cool? It's because it's engineered to be aerodynamic. That's why it looks great. So there's the same engineering to the temple that is sexually arousing, unless you have some perversion where you're into, obese, exotic deformities or something like that. So what I see happening is the woman is depressed, and you're right. She's bailing and there's probably a whole bunch of complicated reasons after, having a kid, but that that desire for men sexually, women know that does not just go away. You're going to be 80 years old and still get a hard on in the morning if you're a healthy guy. That's the way we've been made by God. Sex is an appetite that when it's manicured correctly between husband and wife, like you said, it's the glue. It doesn't just go away. So it needs to be handled correctly. I was thinking,
Do you ever hear his sermon, Be Beautiful, Be Hot for Your Husband?
If
You
only.
ever heard that one?
If only. If only.
You ever heard that one? I mean,
No,
I think mothers are supposed to teach it to their daughters. I mean, you saw that back in like the 40s, and like she would wake up, she would get dressed, she'd put makeup on. You know, she'd be at the house, or maybe she'd go out shopping. You know, it wasn't like she was going out on some dinner date or some ball date every day, but she looked good, and so did the men. They took pride in their appearance. You know, you can go to like, you know, foreign countries when a guy's living in a hut, you know, he comes out with a suit on, you know, and he's cooking dinner or whatever, and he's not getting it stained up or whatever. That's the same idea. This is our temple. You know, when both those temples are becoming one, it better be something special.
And at bottom, it's an indication of your mental health. Basics there. You are not eating correctly. You have addiction to food, like Joe said. You have a dysfunctional relationship with food. And one of the best things you can, because we talk about Christ being our spiritual food, right? We talk about our relationship with Christ. And if you take the paradigm and the problem going on with our disease with food, the same disease is happening with the stuff that we want, like Paul said, tickling our ears. That's why those sermons, like the sermons we want to hear are sardines and fish and like, you know, these foods that are nutrient dense that don't make the taste buds go crazy. But people have this donut, you know, frenzied, sugar addicted sermon TED Talk where they want to be inspired. So it's like they're addicted to spiritual junk food. And so they're spiritually fat and spiritually blind as a result. So that you can't have one without the other. You know, there's this, they run in parallel. And so I hear these excuses just coming up for the older guys. It's, I have to provide for my family and I don't have time. So I'm eating out and I just don't have time to eat correctly or go to the gym. For the younger guys, they're like, my parents fed me crap. And I'm just fat now because my parents screwed me. And what I tell them is like, if you want to have a healthy lifestyle, nothing changes when you look good or when you look better. You're still eating the same stuff. You're still having the same amount of devotion and discipline to go to the gym. None of that changes. So it's something that's just, it's a huge vacuum. It's a huge lacking in your life. Like there's a critical component of your manhood that you are not activating. And it's not like when they're like, oh, it's so hard to go to the gym. You know, it's like you need to be able to have enough exercise. If your job is not an outdoor job or something where you're getting a lot of movement, you need to make up for that every single day. Otherwise, you will be diseased. I was struck by this comment. I was talking to Joe Tillwell. Hopefully, we'll have him on the podcast. He's an extraordinarily awesome dude. He's like in his 60s, shredded, looks great. And that's been his ministry, is to go into churches and help them get their diets under control, start to educate these people so that they can have health, and that will translate to spiritual health as well. Because that's the best argument you can make as far as vanity is. It's like you're diseased in your body, you're diseased in your spirit. This same appetite is here and it's there. It's in the same place. So he said to me something that struck me very deeply. We're on the phone. And he was going up for an altar call, and he's listening to all these people asking for prayer. And you know, there's Cheryl over there asking for diabetes. There's another guy over there asking for another chronic disease. And it struck him. He's like, you know, John, I couldn't help but feel disgusted that these people were asking God for a supernatural intervention for something they could have prevented through being responsible for themselves.
Yeah.
And think about how vain that is. That is vain as it gets. That is so much more vain than somebody who's in the gym who looks at themselves in the mirror to see progress. They're going to call him out. Meanwhile, you're going to talk to the King of Kings when he gave you a healthy body and you destroyed it and you're asking for a miracle? That's the most vain. I mean, the emperor wears no clothes at that point. But they don't see it because it's so common in the church for people to ask for these things. Oh, diabetes, you know, problems with my shoulder, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, all this stuff. And it's like, are you eating seed oils? Yeah, you are. Are you doing all this horrible stuff with your diet? Yeah, you don't even have a diet. You know, and so do you see the vanity there? And it's almost like they've normalized it in the church. So we do kind of have to be a little harsh. I mean, I think about the drill sergeants in the military, and it's their job to wake up these soft bodies and say, you're going to be encountering death. And it's our job to say, you're going to be encountering God looking at you saying, you died of diabetes and you have no excuse.
Well, I mean, I would say that some of these people, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and that was awesome, by the way, really fantastic. And what they would also say is, well, it's not a salvific issue, right? Like, I'm still saved, right? Right. And I think that there's a lot of that even the churches that don't do prosperity gospel stuff, that aren't doing donuts, they still have a way in doing, like, I don't even know what their food is. Maybe they do things like, I see a lot of this in the Reformed camp, which is where I'm at, the Reformed Baptist, Reformed Presbyterian. Like, they're really, really strong in the theology, right? Which is great. And that's why I'm there, because I think they're right. And they're really, really strong in, say, government, like, and culture, but where they haven't plugged the last piece into. And they're also really strong in headship, right? But where they haven't plugged the last piece into is the kitchen. And the thing is, women's uncontested domain in our culture and probably around the world is the kitchen. And the real question is, are men ready to take dominion over the kitchen?
That's a great question.
Our Italian dad, he's a crazy guy. Some might call him a misogynist, but we were kids, and he lived. It was a divorce situation, so he lived out in Cleveland, and we were bouncing around with mom, and we got to go for Christmas, and all the men were in the kitchen, just dominating the Christmas dinner like total masters. And the women were there to set everything up and help, and it was a family affair. But the dudes were manning the irons, they were manning the knives, and they were doing it. And so Joe and I go home, and we're hanging out. And my dad's a crazy guy. He wakes up at 3 a.m, and he wants to serve people breakfast. So we're in the kitchen, we're eating breakfast. The next day, he's tired, and his wife has to make dinner. It's our stepmom, and she's in there cooking dinner, and my dad kind of stumbles in after he's sleeping. He's like, "What's going on in here?" And she's like messing everything up. Joe and I could see that easily. And he's like, "Get out of the kitchen." And she kind of scrambles off, and he's like, "Boys, the kitchen is for men. Women are just wannabes." And I was like, "What, Dad? That's not. Women are supposed to be in the kitchen." And he's like, "No, men in the kitchen, every time." Wow. And it kind of stuck with us because our mom did a lot of the cooking, and Dad would our stepdad would do maybe a little bit here and there. But Joe and I enjoy it. And to this day, we do most of the cooking in the home. We buy a lot of the food. We enjoy it. I don't see it as emasculating at all. I enjoy the culinary process. It's nice to get in touch with your food and know what kind of food you like, and be able to make tastes and flavor combinations that you actually like. And be a part of that. By no means is that just the woman's affair. I mean, if you think about the story between Esau and Jacob, I mean, Jacob was making the food. He's making some lentils. So I don't think his mom was in there. It was just him. So.
And then part of that, even if you're not the husband doing the cooking, which is totally valid and awesome, and men should be able to cook as well, is to say, this is what the family eats. This is what we're eating. We're eating single ingredient foods, right? Like the single ingredient, the easiest way to eat healthy is just minimize the number of ingredients, right? You don't necessarily have to get organic or whatever. Like, packaged food is packaged food. Apples, rice, steak, pretty simple stuff. And you just say, as a man, this is what we're eating. If the wife says, well, I really want to make mac and cheese, or, I really just want to use sunflower, or whatever she's into, it's like, no, this is what we're eating, because this is what we do as a family. But I don't think men are willing to take that level of dominion. And I think rebellion also, I've seen it. I've seen rebellion begin in the kitchen. I think that there are probably more women than we want to acknowledge. And look, this is just real, that manipulate their families through food. Like I'm gonna like if your kid's getting fat, like I have a lot of guys who I've mentored, and I asked them like, they're some of them are overweight guys. In fact, I was mentoring one guy who was like 500 pounds, and I had to think real hard before I took him on as a client. I'm like, okay, can I actually help this guy at the level that he needs? And we had a very successful time together. I'm thrilled with how his life is going right now.
That's awesome.
We did it. Yeah. But I said, well, have you been overweight your whole life? And he went through his whole upbringing and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, I started gaining weight in high school and in grade school. I'm like, oh, okay, so is your parents married? And it's like, well, if who was cooking? Like if mom's cooking and her boys are getting fat, well, guess what? She knows that, right? That's a really good way to emasculate your son. It's a really good way to emasculate your husband. It's a really good way to control your husband from becoming too masculine if you feed him to the point where he's fat.
It's actually a mate guarding tactic, I think.
Yes.
Yeah,
same. And so that's
Extra
the thing.
scoop of rice.
Mate destroying tactic.
Yeah, give him an extra scoop.
Yeah, and because if your husband's fat,
She obviously
you don't
doesn't
have to
give
take
up
care of your
sex.
body, right? Like, oh, you're overweight. Why should I take care of myself? And if you're a man and you don't know how to cook for yourself and your wife, like, this is rebellion. Passive men, rebellious women. This is the same math that plays out everywhere.
I think we kind of like we keep saying the same words. It's hard. Jared's talking about controlling. You get this idea that so and so is doing something that I don't want to do, and I'd rather have fun. I'd rather be sensual. I'd rather please my dopaminergic desires. And being Christians, the Great Commission, Christ asks us to give out of our lacking, to live lives that aren't going to be, quote, prosperous or highly sensual in this world, but to make sacrifices for the betterment of this world. Now, the devil actively wants to make hell on earth. That's what he desires. He wants dysfunction in the families. He wants your temple to be destroyed. Through food, drug addiction, whatever it may be, and he wants to bring actively heaven on earth. Now he what he does is he paints this beautiful, deceptive picture that it's going to be, you're going to like it, enjoy it more, right? Like Tate, I want the Ferraris, I want the house, I want the girls, right? But now you see Tate actually is going for God, even though he has all that, which is showing that unconscious desire for true purpose and meaning in life. So Christians, we fight that battle of evil. We're actively bringing heaven on earth. That is not, and ushering, co-creating that with God, finishing the job of Adam and Eve in the garden, right? Name all these plants, name all these animals, Adam. Co-create with me. So that's how we're fighting. There's heaven that's trying to be here. There's hell that's fighting against it. We're in that battle, and it's not going to be an easy one, and the church needs to stand up and not be agreeable all the time. You're not going to be satiated all the time. You're not going to feel like ready to eat the donuts all the time. You're not going. This is the idea that Christians have to come to terms with, and that's your job. That is the Great Commission. That's what Christ asked you to do. He didn't ask you to have a good time here and to get as much sensuality and desire out as you possibly can, to have a rocking time here on earth with Satan. He asked you to battle Satan and make heaven here on earth, and that takes sacrifice. That's exactly what Christ did from the victim's perspective, and that's what we need to start doing as men more often. Not expecting our wives to come along with us and be like, oh, you're the best thing since sliced bread, honey. I can't wait to eat a nice steak and a potato and maybe some asparagus on the side. No, she wants to eat macaroni and cheese and garbage and fattening horse shit. All right, it's not going to always be it's going to be an uphill battle for men, is what I'm saying. And
especially
it
in
should
the
be an
beginning.
uphill battle. And if it's not an uphill battle, it's probably indicative that you're doing something wrong.
And I'd encourage the people listening, because as you're saying that, bringing to heaven to earth and engaging Christ's commission is the easier. Your life is easier. It's actually the easier choice too. Actually, to be completely honest, it is the easier choice too, because if you're having disease and past your 50s, you're always in the hospital with your wife. You can see pretty quick that you chose the hardest hard. I mean, choose your hard. Life is going to be hard no matter what you do. But you chose the hardest hard. You chose to be in the hospital because you were eating like a savage. And so there you are. And now you are paying the piper. So you need to have more of that perspective on life that's far reaching. And you need to wake up. You need to shake people awake. So like the man in the kitchen, right? Your wife, if you put yourself in the shoes, I've been practicing this. We three have been practicing trying to really be, I guess if you're going to disciple and mentor like you with that really overweight guy, it's like you need to take a moment to try and put yourself in these people's shoes, because there's nuance to their situation. And that's really what they're asking for. It's like, how can you help me with the nuance that makes my situation difficult, because I know the right thing to do, but I'm drowning here. And so I think about the guy who's 45, got kids, and they are rooted in mac and cheese. And you're talking about people coming off of heroin here. Yeah. So he's like, I'm going to have to be in the kitchen. My wife's going to hate me for a while, probably, until she sees those pounds start to shed off. She's not going to submit to this. There's going to be rebellion in this household for a long time. And I'm going to have to submit to Christ instead of submit to the fear. Like Christ says, fear God who can throw the body and the spirit into hell. Nothing else. So the absolution and conviction, the completeness within our conviction has to be able to encounter that pushback of your family hating you for a while, of that satanic inflammation that you're scooping out the pus, bro, and it stinks and everybody hates you, and just deal with it.
I think part of that is you're paying the consequences for being passive too, to let it get to that point. Now you're paying the consequences because you're going to get that pushback, and you did it to yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson was talking about this today, and it's like he was saying this in so many words. We've encountered as a family, me and my family, some horrible opposition, and had to make some insane decisions that felt so uncomfortable I cannot put it into words. And we had this time of uncomfortability, which would vary between days to months to even like years of uncomfortability, like when he came off the benzos. And he's like, he made the right choice. And he's like, we're becoming sort of used to this cycle that once we're done with this uncomfortability, there every single time is an flourishing of life, this gifting, this abundance that occurs, and this recognition of it. And he's like, now we see that as a green flag when this happens, and the church has dropped the ball on that. No
one's describing that.
What they are obsessed with, their gluttony problem, is getting people in the door and aligning with the secular narrative so that they don't make anybody angry and that they don't lose anybody's attention. And that's not what we're supposed to be doing as the church.
Well said. Well said. I deal with this all the time, with guys needing to pay the material consequences of sin, right? So, Christ died to pay the penalty, right? Like of eternal damnation. That's wiped clean. But there are still consequences on earth for your decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to deal with them. And so I love what you said about praying for the relief of chronic conditions that you could have done something about, like brilliant insight. And for a lot of that, I've had guys like, what am I going to do? Like, I need to lose weight, and this is what my wife does. I'm like, this is what I do in my mentorship, is walk these guys through day by day. This is how it's going to be, and you don't have to do it alone. And that's I think is the thing that's very difficult for a lot of men, is they feel like they're in a place where they have to do it alone. And maybe they are. Maybe they're in a woke, floppy church where all the guys are overweight and where the pastor's overweight doing prosperity gospel stuff. And it's like, yeah, Will, like I read this book, I heard your podcast, or I started thinking about things, or the whole vaccine mandates thing was a big wake up call for a lot of guys. Like, I need to take my family in a new direction. I don't know where to start. I'm doing it on my own. It's like, well, you're not doing it on your own anymore because you have me. And then so I'm on the phone with them basically every day, walking them through this process. And it's remarkable what guys can do in a very short time.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
And so that's the thing, is I think I say that men need 3 reconciliations, right? They need a reconciliation with their brothers, with friends, right? They need a reconciliation with their natural father, and they need a reconciliation with God. And if they have those 3 legs, they can stand no matter what against anything. And sometimes it's just can be as simple as having one guy in your corner who's there for you and is there to help you push out of that. Yeah. And so the work that I think we're all doing is to wake up more men to wake up more men.
Yeah. And I think that another issue
Absolutely.
that they have in the church that as we're encountering. We spoke briefly on this when it was just the three of us kind of talking on the phone a while back. And recently we've been having guys in the group mentor newcomers in the group. As it's supposed to be, they're discipling, and it's great because the guy who's mentoring the other guy now, he has to step to his tune, so they're all reading more, praying more. It's great. Mm-hmm. But I told this to the first guy, and I don't know what happened. I don't know why I said. I knew it was going to land weird, but I was like, you just got to hear me on this. I was like, you do not have to like the person that you're mentoring and discipling. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have to be cool. You don't have to have common interests. He doesn't have to be a person that, and that's what I want. And I explained it further to him because I told you that was getting the heart that Christ has for people is he's in love with everybody. He's knocked out by the biggest loser. I don't understand it. Mm-hmm. But I know it's the right thing. And so by giving that person your time and exposing yourself in a way that shows love, those people will become alive to you. And through that discipleship and that care, you're going to find what Christ is, that gift that Joe was talking about that people don't encounter enough because it's so common for people to not expect flourishing moments. It's so common for people to put God in this place where it's just monotonous. Mm-hmm. And when you can do that, and that's why I think a lot of the brothers don't have, like you said, that steps in the reconciliation. Like their idea of relationship with their brother is like friendship from a secular point of view. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's great when you meet somebody you really like and you love and they're inspiring and they're cool and whatever. But on your part, it means so much more when you reach out to somebody who you don't have any of that stuff with. Yeah. And you reach out and you give them your heart and they feel loved. And you begin to understand your short-sightedness and your carnalness and the way that you've interpreted relationships in a sick way, because that's really what can I get out of this relationship? And that's what Christ is trying to get out of here, get out of us. He washed the disciples' feet. Like, what did he get out of that? You know, like he gave us this example of the way we're supposed to pour into people, irrespective of what I can get out of them. You know, mm-hmm. And people are like, what I can get out of them? Money, you know, this, that. It's like, no, you're getting responses out of people. They're what the attention that they give you and the kind of attention they give you is a sort of currency. You develop an appetite for that kind of stuff. And you need to be able to say, that is sick. I don't want that. I want what Christ is giving me, which is he loves everybody, dude. He's knocked out about everybody. Mm-hmm. And so that's a step that I wanted to encourage the younger guys is they try to evangelize or they try to connect. You know, if God puts somebody in your life and you don't like them, but you're coming across them every day, there's your answer, dude.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I was going to ask you, how was the response on that, those Instagram posts you made?
The obesity and Christianity ones?
Yeah, and another question I'd written down, Donna, is like, why do you think the church avoids that topic so much? It's like they'll sit and hammer on porn or whatever else over and over and over again, but man, that topic is like untouchable.
So to answer the question first about the responses, I remember the first post got the most responses probably because it had a lot of like obese fat bodies, like kind of revealed a little bit on the cover, and so it's really shocking. Because if you look at it, the way that the series of 3 posts go is there's really obese bodies, and then the second post, the cover is, you know, the fat people walking, and the third post is like slim people looking out a window. So just to kind of show the progression, like if you walk this path, this is what you can look forward to. It's very intentionally done. The first one I think might be the first one might be my most popular post of all time. I think it probably is. The reel, of course, that we showed blew everything else I've done out of the water. But the response that I got, I don't remember the response from the men, but I think it was pretty positive. But what I expected happened, which was the response from the women was furious. Like, who are you to tell me, blah, 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 hormones, blah, blah, blah. You don't understand. And it's like, and what I say is like, look, you're not the first women in history to lose weight. And every woman that I've ever talked to, it's like, oh, hormones. And then they say, yeah, it was diet and exercise. They all say that, right? Right. And so the thing is it's just rebellion. And I think it's that last line of, you can't tell me what to do with my body. My body, my choice, for both men and women. You can't tell me what to do with my body. It's like, well, actually, God does get to tell you what to do with your body. And you're in rebellion. This is for both men and women. You're in rebellion for different reasons, I think. Actually, now that I get to think this through, it's rebellion from God in different ways. Men being passive, abdicating on their health. A fat man is a weak man. Period. Today, I can do a whole thing about dating and fatness too.
It's amazing you have to explain that. A fat man's a weak man. It's like,
Well, the
yes,
thing, well,
sir.
I don't think it was always the case though, because you can look back at guys like Charles Spurgeon or Churchill, right? Like these were big dudes that were strong, but I think that I'm not quite sure what the difference is, but I think part of it is that the world is trying so hard to make us weak in every possible way now, that to be fat like that is generally to have given into that level of weakness, versus back then it was abundance. Now it's surrender to weakness. That's my best guess. So for men, it's them being passive in terms of confronting the reality of their lives. And I think for women, it's just rebellion against men. Obesity, blue hair, tattoos, what that actually is, what you see when you see liberal women doing that, what that actually is rebelling against beauty standards and making themselves as ugly as possible, because they're rebelling against God's created order to embody beauty. So what looks the same superficially between men and women in terms of expanding waistlines is caused, I think, by two different phenomena. It's men being passive and not taking ownership over their lives and taking responsibility, and it's women rebelling from God's created order. And so when you call out men for that, it's pretty easy to call out men for that. Like, dude, you're pretty fat. And like, yeah, you're right. There's probably that, right?
They're like, yeah, you know.
Yeah, but
I'm
you
a
call
fat ass.
I'm a fat ass. But you call
Yeah,
when you
man.
call Lizzo fat, it's like, oh, Lizzo's beautiful. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
Right?
Total
So-
delusion. You're like, okay,
I think
Yeah.
part of that reason
that's weird.
I was thinking
No,
about that.
it's not. It's normal. Yeah.
It's our sin-
I think
it's our
it
sin
kind of
natures
makes sense
interacting.
because of like women's essentially value is tied into their beauty, and men's
part of our
value is more so tied. It doesn't really tie into our beauty. It's tied more into our provider ability. So I think
Strength.
me and my friend were having this conversation. I think the equivalency of like calling a woman fat is saying the man like is broke, or like you know it's got a bad career, like just basically hurting his criticizing his providing capabilities.
He's a loser.
Illegitimate person.
Like that, but that's that's theory. I don't know what you guys think on that.
I think that's pretty close to right. But I think the reason why you can say that to a man, like you can call a man a loser and he'll be personally offended, but you can't say it to women because you can't question women. Like
Yeah.
this was the whole thing with the Eric Kahn reel, accountability for wives. It's like we have a society right now. There is no mechanism to hold women accountable at all. It does not exist. And so a lot of women have grown up their entire lives, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, never having been held accountable for anything.
Especially if they're beautiful.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation. Wow.
Yeah.
So when you actually start proposing a religion that holds women accountable, or start proposing standards that hold women accountable, look at the abortion debate. When you try and tell women, no, you can't kill your baby, you can't tell me what to do. The whole energy behind abortion is not because women actually want to kill babies.
Rebellion. Yeah.
It's rebellion. Exactly.
Yep.
So it's a similar spirit, obviously very different magnitude, that motivates the whole obesity thing. It's rebellion. And when you try and tell a woman that you are fat and you are in rebellion, what she's reacting from is that place of rebellion. You can't say that to me. It's like, absolutely, yes, I can.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the nature of it, I think.
Yeah, we got to ruin some Thanksgivings here, you know? That's what we got to
Yeah.
do. We got to get it. You know, and I think people I think that intrinsically within us, we ignore problems. I mean, it's so good for somebody to sit in front of the mirror and just, if they're fat, just look at themselves, like strip down and look at your body, man.
Mm-hmm.
Look at your body and then tell me you're not fat. But I think one of the more perplexing things being a man, because I got my brother over here, and, you know, because we're twins, there is so much shared interest that we share, and it's a blessing. It's a blessing, man. And going back to my Italian dad, he enforced that on us. He's like, you guys have a blessing. You love each other. You never abandon each other. You stick together. That's it. But men somehow can not see critiques in the same. They don't see critiques. They don't absorb them. They don't have that same response, man. And I think that goes back to what you were talking about, these sort of natures between men and women from a biblical perspective. Like there's the sort of what were you saying? Just being
Passive.
complacent, passive.
Men are
and then
passive.
just-
Women are rebellious.
Right. So like the anecdote to each is like rebellion. You need discipline, right? I don't know of any other. When I saw the Jews, in order to get them to submit, you had to. God had consequences, right? Like forgiveness is not a consequence eraser. Period. Otherwise, we're perpetuating delusion. So there's that. For the women, you have discipline, which is like you are now encountering confrontation to better that person. You are encountering confrontation with that person. You're going through the fire. You are walking them through their fire. If that's your wife, your sister, your aunt, whatever, you're walking through the fire with them, enduring abuse because of their rebellion. And you know that because you're a man. You know that that's what you're going to be a part of that situation, and you embrace it. For the men, as they're complacent, the anecdote is get off your ass, right? And usually they receive that critique, that admonishment in a better way. So I guess what I'm starting to think through, and I'd like to hear your thoughts, are what are the anecdotes with these different sort of spiritual conditions between the sexes?
You know, before I jumped on this podcast with you guys, I was talking with my mentor. We talked for about 4 hours today, and I want to try something on. I think men and women in different ways have problems relating to reality. And what I wanted to say is I think women in general have problems relating to reality. That's not to exclude men. We'll talk about men in a second. But women in general have problems relating to reality. And that is one of the things that we love about them, that women are able to create a kind of magic that men can't because they live in this timeless kind of state.
Well, typically they're more neurotic.
And that's part of being disconnected from reality, is that they live in this fantasy. They don't live with the hard on the ground reality of reality in the same way that men do. We're built to take on reality, whether it be, carving civilization out of rock and tree, and the way that women exist in a more imaginal state. Like a feminine woman is the most ungrounded thing in many ways that you'll see. And that's part of her magic, is there's an etherealness to women. So it's a positive thing. But I think one of the things that's going on is that we've cultivated this trance state in women where they're very disconnected from reality. And so they just kind of float. And if there isn't a man shepherding them, they'll just gradually let themselves kind of decay in various ways, whether it's hitting the wall at 35 or 36 or whenever it actually happens. That's reality intruding and saying, hey, the way that you're relating to life now through your beauty is gone forever. And that's reality encountering. The same way with obesity. And it's the same thing with women's relationship with accountability. There are many women that do not have a good relationship with accountability because accountability means reality. And as Alison Armstrong, who's one of my good friends, says, I really recommend her work, accountability in women means the production of testosterone. And testosterone can actually be toxic within women's bodies in high enough concentrations, like in which is way lower than men have in general, but still. So the thing is, women have this bad relationship with reality. Now, what is weight loss? It's encountering hard reality day after day after day, right? Like you have to weigh everything. You have to make sure that you get up on time and you walk the right amount of steps, or you do the right thing, like encountering reality, and it just pops them out of this trance state that they naturally want to be in. Right. And so that I think is so much of what's happening with women, is we're allowing them to be in this trance state because we're not confronting them with reality, and reality will confront them one way or another.
We don't want confrontation,
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
We hate confrontation with women, but they need it. They need it. And that's the thing. Men have a trance state as well. We have it also. And I think men's trance state is just to be like, it'll be fine. Right, as the weeds kind of gradually grow over him. I'll do it tomorrow, something like that. And so I think complacency. Yeah, complacency is, there's some overlap maybe, but there's a way in which it's all going to work out somehow, right? Or I'll take, maybe for men, because I think there is a root difference. For men, it's I'll take care of it tomorrow, right? And so the thing is that you talked about the anecdotes. That's how we have this lack of ability of reality. And so much of the dialogue in masculinity is like, no, you need to start today. Don't wait for the right moment. Don't wait for the right time. Don't wait for Monday. Don't wait till you get all the equipment. Start now, start today.
And I
Right?
think a lot of men think that if they say it just right, and if they frame their argument just right for their wife or for whatever they're encountering, then it will be a cease and desist order.
Wow, that's powerful.
And a lot of men have to come to terms that this is an ongoing battle. That will be reoccurring the rest of your life with your wife, and it's not because it's your fault or her fault. It's just the way that it is, and that's what a man needs to do. He needs to be able to get up in the morning and fight his reoccurring battles with valor, honor, and dignity and courage.
Yeah.
And these men think that for some reason, I don't know, it's the narrative going around that, like, if you're not getting you're obviously not getting taken seriously. It's like, no, that's not being serious or not. It's just that's what it is to be a man. You fight the same battles every day.
Yeah, the results are protracted. They're not going to be ramified by this epiphany moment. Like
Epiphany, it could be an epiphany, but
Oh,
guess
maybe.
what? The
One
next
out of-
day, your wife's going to go talk to her sister-in-law and see some show and blah, 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 and the world's going to come, and you're going to have to fight again against that mimetic desire that women are so inclined to. And to your point, biologically, women's brains are connected. The right hemisphere and the left hemisphere are more connected than a
Unilaterally?
male's. Yes, than the males from the cerebellum, which is the only thing that connects both the hemispheres. And a man's is less connected, allowing him to specialize and focus in on singularities, which is why you get so many scientists, engineers, men they specialize. They're able to obsess over a single thing and take it to a high level, whereas a woman, she's able to see in a broader context. She sees more peripherally, which is why she's a homemaker, because she's thinking about the kids, she's thinking about the father, she's thinking about the family. She's able to multitask all these different things, which is a powerful thing because she's able to elucidate things that, of course, the husband doesn't see, and she's able to show him things and be a guiding force for the man who's hyper focused. But women, it does incline them to being more neurotic for that reason, because her hierarchy can get confused because of that connection, that more connection. So she's able to go on tangents and to sort of lose her focus, where that's what a husband's job is to do. He's supposed to focus us in, specialize into this is the direction we have to go. And one other point I wanted to bring up concerning food. We have an older friend. He's 88 years old. He's suffering from dementia now, unfortunately. But I would take him out to restaurants or to the beach, and he would always be like, there's so many fat people. And I just was like, there's a lot of fat. There's just so many. All the women are fat. They're all just so fat. And this kept on happening over and over and over again. I'm thinking in my mind, like, they didn't have gyms back then. There was no gyms.
No.
There was no diet plans per se. But and I've heard this from a lot of guys now, because I looked into it after he was done talking about it. They were generally, in better shape. And it caused me to think of, living in this capitalistic environment. Nothing against capitalism, it's just the way that it is. These people want you to buy their food. Food is a business, and they want you to buy as much of their food as possible. And I don't think people are aware that food isn't nutritious in the way that it should be, so much as it is built in a way, it's manufactured and designed for you to eat it in excess so that they can make more money, because food is a business now. It is not something that is like a necessity. So when the church confronts and we think about obesity, this is very akin to like some type of a drug issue.
Yeah.
Like you go to any of these, the gas station on the way back home, they got temptation everywhere surrounding them. It's Uber Eats, it's you name it. It's a very powerful force that we are working up against. I mean, multi-billion-dollar corporations that have created food to be a product that is meant to be consumed in such high quantities. So it's also another thing that I wanted to address that I think that we are also fighting against.
It's a drug addiction.
Yeah.
It's an absolute drug addiction. And you're going to,
What do you think? like, what are the solutions with the church with this? 'Cause
Um,
that's what I was thinking about. Like, you're not going to go into the church, like, and get them to preach about this. You're not going to go, like, you can't, like, what's the answer?
I mean, what we're living it. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
or we start our own churches, right? But
Yeah.
like, I really think, the change has to come, from the bottom up, from the inside out. Like, you're not going to get everyone inside your church, but if you show up as a man, and if you're listening to this, and you drop 50 pounds and get in shape, and get a whole new wardrobe and start carrying yourself better, and you got a tan, and everyone's looking better and happy and healthy, someone will look over at you and be like, hey, this guy's got it going on. What did he do? I want some of that. Right. And if enough men do that and create content around it, like, I always encourage a lot of guys to find some way to start creating content about your life. You're on a fitness journey, document it, show other people. You don't have to make money from it. I mean, you can, like, I can talk to you about that as well, but, invite other people into your experience and commit to it. And I think that's the way it happens, because I have not yet seen, even in some of the most theologically strong, culturally strong churches, the real discussion of, like, what are we going to do about our overweight bodies? What are we going to do about it? No one wants to confront it, because
They're all fiends.
right there, sin is so pervasive. Another thing I wanted to say, by the way, around how people were slimmer 80 years ago, I think that's a documented fact. Our food is, even quote unquote healthy food or single ingredient food, is not as nutritious as it once was. Like fruits and vegetables, I think beef as well. Even if you get organic stuff, the soil is not as nutritious. It's not pulling as much nutrients out of the soil because of over farming and many different things. You have electromagnetic radiation. I think EMF probably has a pretty significant influence on us. I think the fact that we lived in climate controlled environments. There's a friend of mine. He's on Twitter. He's a big Bitcoin guy. His name is Alex Svetsky. And what he says is he's not a fitness guy or influencer or anything like that. He talks about Bitcoin, but he says he believes that testosterone is an on-demand hormone. That you actually have to put yourself into situations where testosterone will be produced as a response to your environment. I really like that, because we sit inside. Look, thank God for climate control, man. Like, it's 115 degrees outside and it's 75 in here. So I'm not, saying anything bad about that. But when you think back to 80 years ago, did they have air conditioning back then, or did they experience the fluctuation of the seasons a little bit more, especially men?
They were living in Florida.
There were people
living in Arizona. Well, they did actually. But so I
They
think
had
that
sweaty nutsacks.
Oh,
They didn't care.
Basically, suffering makes for testosterone. We know that through weightlifting. We know that through having to be if you're about to get into a confrontation, a physical fight, your testosterone jumps up.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
Confrontation, which is what we're talking
same
about.
thing. Your testosterone is going to jump up, and that's what the church doesn't want to do. Like, they're afraid of confrontation. They're afraid of suffering. They don't want to self-persecute. Men don't want to self-persecute themselves. And it's a long ways off from the monks' asceticism that went way off into just self-destruction. But we have so much abundance in the westernized culture. I had talked to my buddy. He came back from Israel, and he did like a month and a half over there. Went to Tripoli, and he's like, they're impoverished over there, but then you got Muslims and Christians that are living together, and there's a sense of community. That when he went he landed in Texas, he was just like, this is another world. He was like blown away. He was just like, this is another world completely, just with the excesses that we have here and the materialism that we have here. And when we were 25, we moved to Alaska. Now, Alaska is extremely rugged, and there is life and death in the wintertime. And I remember thinking the community there is, and it's similar to what's going on in Israel and his idea of poverty. It's sort of like there's an impoverished climate there where you have to rely on your fellow man. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire, and if you got stuck on the side of the road and it's wintertime and it's 23 below zero, you're going to die if someone doesn't stop their car and say and save you. And vice versa. You realize that there's an accountability to survival because of the lacking in the climate, or the lacking within the poverty within the food. You're Muslim, I'm Christian. We still have to work together here to feed both of our families. And in America, we don't have that need anymore. So we don't have that suffering. We don't have that. So we have to self-persecute. Us as men, we have to bring on the self-persecution, the pain, to bring that testosterone up, to make these temples able to fight. You know, like you look at the Army, you go through boot camp, they get these guys ready for boot camp. We have our armed forces ready to go. There might not be a war, but we're prepared for it. And that's what men have to realize they have to do. Like, we have to constantly be prepared for the next opposition. And that takes self-sacrifice, self-persecution, doing the things when you don't have to do them. There's not a war here. I'm still going to be fit. I'm still going to eat the right way. I'm still going to know how to clean my guns and how to fire them at a target efficaciously. I'm not going to just sit on the sidelines and eat donuts in case when the zombies do come and be, you know, the big fat shish kebab that John was talking about. That's the idea as being a man. We're proactive. We're not retroactive. We're proactive. We have to maintain that. And if we don't maintain that urgency within us, our hormones go to shit. We go to shit. Men are meant for a purpose. And if we're not ushering heaven and fighting the battle against evil, Satan, then we're sitting on the sidelines. We're going to turn into those fat blobs of feminized garbage.
Yeah. And I think that I was just going to, that's kind of becoming the if we try and encapsulate this for a while, like, what is the antidote to the church? What do you do? And it's radical self-persecution. And in that, you're going to find humility, and you'll be able to wipe away the delusion that our sickness and the disease of the urbanization of our country in the West has caused. The disease in the West, the urbanized settings that we're in, causes the mental illness, causes the dysfunction, because the relationships they're only, the constituent of the relationships is, what can I get out of this? The guy in Alaska, it's not what can I get out of this. It's because I'm a virtuous man. I'm going to save this guy on the side of the road who's dying. Go ahead.
We were talking to Zach, and he's talking about his kids and what he's going to have to do with the education system. And he's going to make the sacrifice of possibly homeschooling and coordinating with families of a like mind, you know, getting a little bit tribal, other Christian families, and like getting on tutors to teach their kid that the tutors that they affirm in their beliefs and what they're actually teaching and indoctrinating their children. And they're going to get together and make that sacrifice to, we're going to put that extra money down, that we were going to buy this new car that we really don't need, or move into this house that's bigger with the extra room that we really don't need, right? Or buy these clothing, or any of this material garbage that's been going on, this mimetic desire for this status that isn't going to do them any good, but they're actually paying attention to their family, making those sacrifices.
Yeah, family's number one. So when I say radical self-persecution, it's actually not that. It's just going to feel that way because of the delusion that you're stuck in due to the sickness of the urbanization that we're in now. It's going to feel that way at first, but you're actually reorienting the hierarchy of value, which is that sacred nomenclature that comes from the Bible that's saying put your family first. So now your son's going to school with hand-me-downs, you know, but he feels prideful. He feels the spiritual pride, the boldness, the humility. He knows that just because he doesn't have the new clothes and mom's not rolling up in the brand new SUV, he knows, because his family cares about him, that he is loved. And that's all that matters, because he has that. And that's his self-persecution that we in the West don't understand. Yeah, it's like if you put your kid first by sending him to a private school, or doing what Zach was doing with trying to connect with these parents and to hire private tutors, that's saying that I can't afford to send my kid to public school. I can't afford to do that. I can't afford to do those things, and changing the paradigm so that our values are actually reflected when you open up the book.
I can't afford to send my kid to that school because he's the most precious thing in my life. We could never afford to do that, so I'm going to, Rusty Fuel. Your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit. Gluttony is a sin like adultery. The question is, are we serious about our faith?
Amen.
Thank you, Rusty Fuel.
Chat.
Thank you for the super chat.
Hit us again. There's another one from Rusty. There's something wrong with our food. After 2 weeks in France of eating into more than normal, I lost weight and felt better.
Yeah, I mean, it's all genetically
I've heard that.
engineered. I mean, it's completely true. Like Joe was saying, the manufacturers here in the United States make food to be not nutrient dense, so you are constantly hungry, and you're eating quantities of food that don't reflect the amount of nutrients you're actually getting. So you're constantly hungry for more. But yeah, it's a drug. It's a drug. It's like heroin. It destroys you. It's not food. It's not food. Don't stop looking at it like food. It's not food. Just because you eat it, chew it up, and shit it out doesn't mean it's food. So yeah, you need to reconnect with the with what food is.
Right.
But I think aligning that narrative with what we can afford to do and not afford to do as Christians is it's imperative, because if we purport to take value and be in submission to Christ and fight the battle of good and evil, you can't afford to send your kids to a public school. You can't afford to be obese. You can't afford to go along with the secular narrative. You can't afford to keep your mouth shut when certain things are going on around you, and your kid's getting told he can chop his dick off and turn it inside out, and your daughter can go on hormones that castrate. You can't afford to have these. You cannot afford this as a Christian. Yeah. It's not a possibility. Yeah. It's not even something that you can flirt with in your brain. You can't flirt with a sewage slide. You can't flirt with these things as Christians.
I think just a sort of a allegory.
It's weakness.
You think about the wolf in sheep's clothing. Like I think about that. I'm like, how would you tell it was a wolf? And Jesus obviously says, look through the fruits, but it's also the smell. Like sheep smell a certain way. When you smell disease and you see it rampant, there's wolves. You can smell that wolf under there, man. You can smell that nasty, old, mangy wolf under there. And I actually had this thought, too, about testosterone. Like, I was listening to Bishop Barron, and he was talking about how the Holy Spirit is kind of underplayed in our prayers, and as a personage of God, kind of gets a back seat. Everybody's always praying to God the Father and Jesus. And I definitely see the Holy Spirit. It kind of like an image came to me while we were talking about it. It's just like the Holy Spirit is our spiritual testosterone. Like we need to be praying for that to happen in us. Pray to the Holy Spirit to fill us, and know that once we graduate past this self-persecution thing, instead of seeing it as self-persecution, we're going to be seeing it as fulfillment in Christ, which is what we're all after.
Like you say no until it feels good.
Say no until it feels good, and then the Holy Spirit will just get you. But I'm sorry, we're talking too much.
It was great.
Yeah.
I'm learning a ton. No, it's a great way of thinking about all of this stuff. Like you have to accept self-denial as just part of your life. That's the Christian call, right? You're not allowed, you're not allowed to do the things that the secular world does, that they celebrate. No, sorry, can't do it, right? And so if you see the secular world all going that way, not even with chopping kids' dicks off and, gay sex and all that, but if you see that they're all getting fat, and they're all just plugging into whatever the metaverse and playing video games and overindulging in everything. If you see the world going that way as a Christian, there's probably a pretty good chance that you should be going the exact opposite direction, even if you don't know why.
Yeah.
Right? Like, well, the world's going that way. I don't go I'm going that way. So if everyone's blowing up like balloons in the world, I should probably not do that. Right?
Bouncing.
Right. Yeah. People don't want to do that though, because they still want to kind of be part of the world, because the world that we've set up compared to any other time in human history, it's pretty good. Right. True. Except for it asks a lot of us. It asks for little pieces of our soul now, and it gives us back in exchange bits of comfort, bits of pleasure, on dopamine, right, on demand. And what does it take in exchange? And people don't want to give up that pleasure. And I get it. I mean, I have my own things. Like, I like social media. Like, I like chatting with my bros. Like, it's fun. But you know what? Like, I got to go through the discipline of like blocking that stuff during the day, so that I don't overindulge in my own particular thing. So anyone listening, like, I'm not holding myself up as any example of like the way that everyone should have to be. I have my own struggles, and so do we all. The thing is that we have to confront them boldly and with courage, and endure the discipline and endure the pain. And just to this point, I did a 5.5 day fast about a month ago.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. No food for 5.5 days. One of the best things that I've ever done. Is such a great spiritual discipline. And the way that fasting works for anyone who hasn't tried it yet is that you're not hungry constantly for 5.5 days.
A wave.
It comes in waves. And what I experience is that in myself, I pray through those waves.
Yeah.
And when I pray through the waves, it like squeezes repentance out of me of things that I've done in the past. Like, oh, I got to pick up the phone and call somebody and apologize for that. But it's so good. It's so good. And then I'm free of it. I'm free of it too. And I dropped a bunch of weight too. It's incredible how much weight you lose if you don't eat.
God always outgives you, right? He always outgives you. It's like, now you drop some weight too.
Yeah. So, in the same way, like you're talking about the waves of going through fasting, if you're cutting yourself off from whatever, drinking a Coke or smoking cigarettes or whatever it is whatever your addiction is, if you can actively remove it for yourself and then you encounter the pain of the self-denial, you pray through it.
Mm-hmm.
You pray through it. You lean on God through it, not my strength, but yours. And you'll find it may take time. It may take longer than 5.5 days. It may take months. I mean, for alcoholics, it can take much longer than that. But the prayer builds that relationship with God in a way that nothing else can.
Yeah.
And then you become truly strong and able to take anything on.
Yeah.
And that kind of teaching isn't given today.
It's not. And you're in a leadership position, so you need to be fasting. I mean, it's like it comes with the territory. Mm-hmm. If you're in a leadership position, you need to be fasting. We fast 3 days out of every month at the end of the month.
Wow.
Because you're dependent on, like, that prayer. Like, people don't understand. Like, when you're fasting and you're praying, it's some of the most intimately beautiful experiences you've ever had, man. And people just don't know. Like, that's why you need to talk about it. And it feels wrong because you read that verse, like, don't you get your reward if you go talking about how you did something, and but people need to hear about it this time and age. And I'm so happy you're bringing up fasting, man.
Yeah, tell me about what you do. Like the last 3 days of every month you fast or something like that?
Yeah. We've been doing this for, I think this is going to be we started November of 2022.
Oh, wow.
So we've been doing
like
this for
9
a while
months
now. Yeah. And it's been profound on so many levels. I can't tell you how much. I can't imagine not doing it. I look forward to it every month.
Yeah.
I feel like it is just, John calls it the vacation.
I do.
You get so much time back.
It's so enlightening. It's so, just your connection. You really it's a superpower. It's an absolute superpower. Like, you drink a little bit of coffee on your third day of your fast, and you are on drugs, bro. Like, on God-given drugs. Like, your brain works like a laser beam. God allows connections to happen that would never have happened otherwise. It is absolutely profoundly, and you'll know this from this reason why I say that, it's like a psychedelic experience, kind of. It truly is.
I think that the parallels are is a sense. When you're on a psychedelic, it's like you could look at a bottle of water and just be like, wow, these bubbles is so. Wow, you're just so invested in the particulate, the minute, the nuance, everything. It's just crazy, and so, like, your sensorium is just ultra sharp, and I feel like the same thing occurs when you fast.
We're not designed to be eating as much food as often as we do, right?
We're meant to starve, man.
Yeah, all that blood is in your gut, and then when you're
starve.
fasting, like, the chronic maladies you have, like, your body's finally able to say, okay, I don't have all this duty to digest. I can send this blood elsewhere. Like, God will always outgive you. It's like you think you're just giving the fast up to God, and God's like, I'm going to give you tenfold. And now you don't have any shoulder problems. And now whatever.
Your gut issues are healed. Like, you have longevity. You get to live a longer life. I've never come out of a fast and been weaker. I've never. My progression ends up being the same. I never lose muscle mass. None of that stuff. I just lose some fat, some water, and I have to deal with that. Because it's a horrible thing to lose fat,
Yeah.
But it's just absolute bounty, like John said. You think you're sacrificing. You think you're giving a sacrifice, but really you're just getting a return.
And I'd say two things to help with making sure you're maximizing your fast. If you do cardio when you fast, like Joe and I, we like to walk. It's part of our prayer time and morning ritual. It's good to have some salts at night, like maybe a little shot glass of pickle juice, maybe take some magnesium, stuff like that. It's not there's no calories there, but you're paying attention to your biology, so you're not hurting yourself if you don't have enough salt or something like that. It's not good.
Yeah, and 3 days is a long time for someone to begin with. I would recommend start off with just a day. Start off with one meal. and kind of, get used to that intermittent fast for a while. Maybe not do all the food, and then just get your body kind of prepared for the 3 days, or 2 days rather, and then 3 days. And then once you're done doing it, for now, my body immediately knows what's going on. It's used to it now. It's just, it's ready to go.
Yeah, it's like a habit. I used to do
habit.
36 hours every week.
Wow.
And my body just, it was
You
not
don't read,
difficult at all.
Yeah, you're not like, oh my, wow.
Yeah, it's expected.
What was your experience like? Did you just like blast out a 5-day fast to go into it, or did you have any experience before?
I fasted between Christmas and New Year's last year.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, because what happened was it was Christmas weekend and I went over to my dad's place, and he and his fiance had a big like thing. And then what actually happened is I made Christmas dinner for myself and I like overate my own food.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, there are worse things. And then I woke up the next day, like I felt a little bloated. So I'm like, I'm just going to fast. And then I just like kept fasting. It's like, okay, I'm really kind of being into this. And that was how I got into it. And then something similar happened when I fasted last month. Like it just kind of seemed like, where was that? I would gotten back from out of town. I'll have to think about that. It just seemed like a good thing to do. And as I checked in with God and my intuition, it said, okay, let's see how far we can go with this. And it seemed like Saturday at noon was a good time. So that's what I went for. And it was really worth it. It wasn't scheduled ahead of time. It just felt like the right thing. And it was really the right thing to do.
Awesome.
It was a real letting go of what had been a very difficult, but good few months of like massive amounts of overcommitment, doing way too much stuff. I did it all really well. Like I'm proud to say that, but I did way too much. And so it was real letting that go and a reset. And in fact, I think I mentioned earlier that I have cleaned out like over 4th of July weekend. I cleaned out my apartment. I cleaned out my storage unit. I cleaned out my fridge. Wow. So there's been a whole big process over the past month or so of like a lot of like letting go and getting ready for the next phase, which is actually pretty exciting now that I think about it.
Yes, it is.
One question, because we're going to wrap up here.
Yeah.
Where do you see the red pill masculine movement heading in the future?
Are we talking about the Christian side or the secular side?
I would say the secular side.
Well, okay. There's a couple different aspects to the question.
It's like a whole nother podcast, Joe, on that question.
Well, I mean, I would just like to, because I had kind of noted that it was on a decline, and you even see with like Tate going towards God, and I just find this interesting how there's sort of this sway going by, because Rollo being non-prescriptive, being a rationalist, and this reason kind of creeping in.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I saw happening last year, but this was in 2022, once I started getting into the whole Christianity aspect of the dialogue, was I saw this coming into the manosphere and the red pill space. It was inevitable that it was going to happen. There were signs back then. And one of the things that's going to happen once that impact really shows up, which it's starting to, is that a lot of the guys in the manosphere red pill space have turned themselves into caricatures, and they're not who they say they are. Like what they sell through social media is not who they are behind the scenes, right? And so the weight of conviction of sin is going to become very, very heavy on some of them. And you can already see that happening. And when the weight of sin becomes very heavy on men, what happens? They start acting out and they start acting crazy.
True.
And they start reacting against Christ. And there's a lot of that going on, in the manosphere, especially active, terrible things, blasphemous things being said. Yeah. That's the weight of sin landing on these men and squeezing them. That's the conviction of the Holy Spirit, and they're responding negatively to it. Some men may be forced into a position or be convicted enough, like, wow, this really is the way, and they do let go. That will require them to repent of almost everything that they've taught prior. So, for example, for guys that are in the seduction space, right? If they've been selling sex at all and they get convicted by the Holy Spirit, they have to burn their businesses down. Now, God will give them back something better, but still, and that's a real resistance to guys and that's going to be, there's a lot of that going on. Now, I think the only way forward to talk about masculinity and femininity is in Christ. Because you can't root it anywhere else. Like, where are you going to root it?
Talking about relation, yeah,
evolution, like it doesn't work that way, right? And so That's why, for me, I've stopped talking about Christianity, the masculinity space, so much, and I think I'll leave that to the pastors. I think there are pastors that are more skilled at that in many ways, and also because like it created a lot of personal blowback to me. I wasn't even trying to do it, and I went through a difficult season where I was being like actively slandered, on social media and having to be above it all, which I'm happy to do, but it's like it didn't make my day. So I would rather start talking to Christian men, and that's the direction of my podcast anyway.
Amen.
Start talking to Christian men about how to be better men. And I'm
great.
having a lot of success with that because those men are really ready. And so I gather the really masculine pastors onto my show and the men and women, and there's a real dialogue that's coming up. So
Hallelujah.
yeah, I'm thrilled about it.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen to the red pill space? I think you're going to see more and more insane behavior, more and more rebellion, and more pressure. Some men may pop out of that. Some men may get saved out of that. And I pray that they do. The door is always open. But until then, I think the contribution that the red pill has to make to the overall dialogue about masculinity is pretty much over. It's said everything that it has to say. There's only so many times that you can say originally men do hard things. Now there will always be new guys coming into the space who need those lessons. But in terms of like we started the conversation like the Renaissance, right? Like think of it like an artistic movement. Like there's an artist that's doing or a musician, right? The musician has his first big hit album. And after a while, as he's touring on his hit single, like I kind of want to hear you play something else. It's
Yeah.
like, but there's nothing new for them to play. So the hit single, someone will always discover the hit single, like, wow, this song's amazing. How have I never heard this before? But the catalog just isn't there. Meanwhile, in the dialogue about Christian masculinity, there's this enormous cosmic catalog that we can talk about. And so
Enormous
it's
whole.
exactly. And so it's way more interesting. So you'll
That's
see the
beautiful. Man.
yeah, so you'll see the red pill guys playing their hit songs and good for that, but I would like to see these guys who are so capable and so intelligent and so much to offer. I would like to see them give their gifts to God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Instead of pigeonholing themselves.
Exactly.
You know what comes to mind when you said all that? King Saul.
Yeah.
You know, King Saul, he was told to do something, he just got crazier and crazier. He's gotten more and more nuts. Started just he's off the rail. He's not enjoying himself at all.
Yeah.
So I love that. That's a great place to end. I think we should definitely. That's a great conversation point, Joe, to talk about. So there's so much we can say about what the vision is, like the positive side, and how encouraging that is. So I just wanted to thank you so much. Do you have something you want to say,
I was
Mike?
going to say, why don't you give us a quick overview? You got your conference coming up on in September, virtual conference. If you want to give the audience a quick rundown on that and then where they can find you.
Yeah, so I started the Renaissance of Men digital conference series. I think I started it back in March with the first one with a lineup of all male speakers. I just did the second one, which was a lineup of all female speakers. I'm thrilled with how that went. It was amazing to get all these really godly women together, 7 of them talking about godly femininity. You can watch both of those conferences are available on Vimeo on demand at renofmen.vhx.tv, and you can put in the code renofmen and take $5 off. And then the third one is coming up on September 16th with you guys, which I'm very excited about. And the theme, the first conference was just about men and masculinity, mostly fatherhood, but not all the guys were fathers. The second one was about women. And I really want this third event to be about young guys like under 30 or younger guys, because I think that that's a community of men that they look at Andrew Tate or guys like him, like that guy has the energy that I want in my life. How can I find that? And so I want to bring together the younger men that have that vibrant, enthusiastic, fired up masculine energy for Christian men and show them that this exists. So that's the philosophy behind this third event. I'm really looking forward to it. You guys are going to be there. Brandon from Masculine Revival is going to be there. My good friend Arthur from the Blood and Rain podcast is going to be there. Kaz TV is going to be there as well. I've got a couple other guys I'm working on also. So it's going to be a great day. And that'll be all day on September 16th. Tickets are not on sale yet. But you can bookmark renofmen.com/conference. And when that information is available, that'll be live.
It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. Can't wait to see that. It's going to be so cool, man.
Yeah,
it's going to be great. We need to get together. That's us, sharpening the iron. Be a part of that, guys.
Yeah,
And get in that space.
Real quick, hey Rusty, thank you again for the other comment, and I guess we can close with this because this is really good. There's a giant difference between guys wanting a traditional girlfriend and actually coming to Christ. They are almost unrelated.
I second that. Yeah.
100%. That's exactly what's going on the red pill. They don't have any roots. You want the fruits, but you ain't got the roots, so it's just not the way it works.
Yep. You're gonna be buying fruit, bro, and it's gonna rot. It's gonna suck.
Love it. I love it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Will. Well, we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Love you, brother.
Love you guys.
Pleasure.
Thank you.